Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Driven by doubt, Lubbock decided to test the waters. Using Crosstail, he sent a web of razor-sharp wires toward the black-haired boy. To his surprise, the boy deftly evaded the attack. As the wires grazed his face, they tore through the bandages concealing it. What was revealed stunned everyone. When the black-haired boy's face was exposed, Tatsumi and the others were stunned into silence. Dr. Stylish's twisted sense of aesthetics had led him to alter the boy's appearance for what he considered perfection. As a result, the face revealed beneath the bandages bore a striking resemblance to someone they all knew very well. Seeing the black-haired boy's face and recalling his weapon, Tatsumi and his comrades were instantly filled with a mix of shock and fury. The Tegu Winter Knight wasn't an ordinary weapon anyone could use. It had practically become Wood's signature weapon. And now, at such a critical moment, someone who looked like Wood wielded it. There could only be one explanation. Impossible. This has to be a lie. That guy must be a fake. He's only holding Winter Knight like a regular sword. It's not even in its released form. Lubbock exclaimed in disbelief, his voice shaking. The suggestion of what this meant was too horrifying for Lubbock, who usually appeared carefree but held a deep bond with his comrades. Of everyone in Night Raid, his closest relationship had been with Wood. They were childhood friends who had joined the army together, defected to the Revolutionary Army together, and survived countless battles side by side. To accept that Wood had been killed, mutilated, and transformed into this abomination was too much. Manifestation of the demon god, Winter Knight. As if to shatter any lingering hope, the black-haired boy raised the blade under Dr. Stylish's command. With a roar, the surrounding air erupted with icy winds as a fierce ice dragon, Skaza, materialized behind him, roaring into the battlefield. The ground beneath them froze instantly, covered by a thick layer of ice. And when the cold subsided, there he stood. A figure clad in a gleaming blue suit of armor, wielding a crystalline blue longsword, Wood's Tegu in its fully released state. Seeing that armor, that weapon, and that stance, Lubbock could no longer contain himself. You bastard. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Lubbock roared, his fury exploding. His voice trembled with anger as he glared at Dr. Stylish, eyes brimming with murderous intent. If Wood had died in battle, Lubbock could have accepted it, mourned him, and honored his memory. But to see his comrade desecrated like this was beyond intolerable. It was a desecration of everything Wood stood for. You've turned him into a puppet, you monster. Lubbock shouted, his rage overflowing. Oh? How do you like my masterpiece? Dr. Stylish said with a smug grin. This is my latest and most exquisite creation. My ultimate work of art. Isn't it magnificent? Dr. Stylish's words only fueled their hatred. Lubbock wasn't the only one fuming. Tatsumi and Akam both stepped forward, their weapons drawn, their intent clear. You're going to pay for this. Tatsumi shouted, his voice filled with anger as he charged at Dr. Stylish. But before he could get close, the modified Wood moved like a shadow, effortlessly intercepting him. His speed was unmatched as he closed the distance in an instant, clashing with Tatsumi. Akam followed close behind, her blade aiming straight for Dr. Stylish. But, just like Tatsumi, her attack was blocked. The modified Wood moved with an unnatural precision, countering her blade and knocking her back with a swift, brutal strike. Clang. The sound of weapons clashing echoed through the battlefield. The modified Wood parried both Murasame and Tatsumi's spear with his crystalline blade. Then, with a single fluid motion, he delivered a devastating kick to Tatsumi, sending him flying across the battlefield like a cannonball. As Tatsumi crashed into the ground, Akam continued her assault, but the modified Wood was relentless. With a swift punch, he sent her tumbling as well. Tatsumi and Akam were both thrown aside like rag dolls, their bodies skidding across the frozen ground. Before they could recover, Lubbock unleashed Crosstail, his wires slicing through the air in a deadly web. However, the modified Wood responded with perfect timing, conjuring an icy barrier around himself. Though the wires slashed through the ice, they bought him enough time to evade. Bullet. Now's your chance. Lubbock shouted. Bullet, already poised and ready, charged forward with a roar. He wielded his Shingu, Tiger Roar spear, its tip glowing with energy. Leaping into the air, he brought the spear down with all his might. Clang! The sound of impact reverberated like a thunderclap. Despite the overwhelming force of Bullet's attack, the modified wood managed to block it, his blade meeting the spear in a fiery clash of sparks. Even so, the impact forced the modified wood backward, his feet carving deep trenches into the frozen ground as he slid nearly 10 meters away. Not bad. Bullet muttered, gripping his spear tightly. His arms tingled from the impact, but he refused to let up. Still as tough as ever. Bullet said, breathing heavily. But I can't believe someone like him could have been taken down. Through their brief exchange, Bullet noticed something off about his opponent. Though the modified wood's fighting style and techniques were eerily familiar, they lacked a certain fluidity. A certain soul. It felt mechanical, devoid of the spark that made Wood who he was. This thing. It's just a shell. Bullet muttered to himself, gripping his spear tighter. He's not the same anymore. Despite the overwhelming odds, the group stood their ground. The real Wood might have been unbeatable, but this wasn't him. This was just a puppet. A hollow replica. And that gave them hope. Chapter 435, as Death changes strategies. No, although the fight wasn't long, I feel like this guy isn't the Wood we know at all. After hearing Bullet's remark, Akam, who had been silent until now, climbed out from the rubble of shattered stones and spoke. Akam, like Bullet, was a battle-hardened warrior. However, compared to Bullet, she shared a closer similarity with Wood in terms of being an exceptional swordsman, allowing her to perceive things more acutely. In her past encounters with Wood, she not only felt his overwhelming oppressive strength but also the sharp and intimidating presence of his swordsmanship. Yet, when facing this Wood, she felt none of that. True, the opponent's speed and strength were exceptional, and even their technique bore a striking resemblance to Wood's. But resemblance is all it was. Imitation can never reach the original's heights. Moreover, Wood's terrifying sword energy was beyond compare. Why had this opponent not used it even once so far? It might have been a coincidence for one person to notice, but with both Akam and Bullet, battle-hardened experts, asserting that this wasn't the real Wood, Datsumi and Lubbock started to believe it too. TCH, so you figured it out, huh? I suppose that's to be expected from comrades who once fought side by side with him. Dr. Stylish smirked arrogantly as he introduced his masterpiece. But so what? While this isn't your comrade Wood, I've already integrated his combat data into this creation. Now, he possesses the same combat skills as your Wood, and he even wields the Imperial Arm Winter Knight. This is a being that can fight General Death head-on and remain evenly matched. What makes you think you lot can defeat him? As Dr. Stylish described his modified version of Wood, his face brimmed with pride. In his view, his creation had already surpassed the original Wood. The others were merely ignorant, incapable of appreciating the brilliance of his work. Humans have emotions, fears of death, and a sense of pain, whereas modified humans do not. Compared to fragile human bodies, the physique of a modified human was far superior, unaffected by injuries or weakening in combat. Stylish believed his creation, equipped with Wood skills and the Winter Knight Imperial Arm, coupled with the innate advantages of being a modified human, was undoubtedly stronger than the original Wood. However, as Dr. Stylish basked in the satisfaction of his ultimate creation, Bullet, Akam, and the others' reactions left him annoyed. Upon learning that the young man in front of them was merely a modified human and not the real Wood, Bullet and the others visibly relaxed. Part of the relief stemmed from the possibility that Wood might still be alive. Another reason was that, knowing this was a mere counterfeit, its threat level was significantly reduced. A hollow imitation, strong in appearance but weak in essence. Don't underestimate true warriors. Something soulless like this could never be our match. Bullet's words instantly raised Dr. Stylish's anger to its peak, as the evaluation mirrored as Death's prior critique. Stylish couldn't understand what they meant by a true warrior. But he dismissed them as nothing more than muscle-brained fools who relied on brute strength in combat. Kill them all. Wipe them out. Initially intending to capture Tatsumi and the others alive for further experiments, Stylish changed his mind. He wanted to show them the true power of his greatest creation. The modified Wood charged forward and slashed at Tatsumi. But now that Tatsumi knew the figure before him was just an ordinary modified human and not the real Wood, he became much calmer. Instead of dodging, he met the attack head-on. In the ensuing exchange of blows, Tatsumi was quickly overwhelmed. However, Bullet and Akam immediately intervened to cover him. Faced with two of Night Raid's strongest fighters, the modified Wood, armed with Wood's combat skills, still held his ground. Yet, he failed to notice someone had been concealing their presence since the beginning. As Akam and Bullet engaged the modified Wood, their movements subtly guided him towards a particular spot. Meanwhile, Tatsumi turned his attention to Dr. Stylish, engaging him in a fierce fight to prevent any interference. This is nothing but an empty shell with strength and skills. Without self-awareness or the ability to adapt its tactics, it can only rigidly follow a preset sequence of moves. Why should we fear such an enemy? Akam and Bullet coordinated their attacks seamlessly. Since the modified Wood's combat style followed predictable patterns with no variation, the two quickly adapted to his routine. One of them would feint an attack, forcing the modified Wood into a predictable defensive maneuver, while the other exploited the opening to land a strike. Normally, an opponent would adjust their fighting style after suffering from such predictable tactics. Unfortunately, the modified Wood lacked the logical thinking to adapt and could only battle according to its programming. For every type of attack, it relied on a specific counter programmed into its database. This rigid, mechanical style of fighting quickly turned it into a plaything for Akam and Bullet. To be fair, Wood's combat skills are truly formidable, even if this is just a hollow imitation. Despite what I said earlier, I don't think I could defeat this thing one-on-one. Bullet admitted with a wry smile. His remark reflected the reality of the situation. Even as he and Akam attacked in tandem, one feinting and the other striking, they managed to land successful hits on the modified Wood only about 30% of the time. Wood's reaction speed and combat prowess were so exceptional that even when his body was momentarily stiff from blocking one attack, he could still fend off the follow-up strike. Combined with the Winter Knight's formidable defense and the modified human's tireless endurance, Bullet and Akam acknowledged that facing this opponent alone would have been nearly impossible. Even as the two pressed their advantage, the battle remained a grueling stalemate. Akam's Morass aim was a reliable weapon, but Bullet's Lionel Spear was a self-damaging weapon that drained his stamina the longer the fight dragged on. After an intense struggle, they finally succeeded in driving the modified Wood into a trap Lubbock had prepared earlier. Sensing the danger, the modified Wood attempted to use Winter Knight to create ice barriers to shield itself from Lubbock's crosstail steel threads. However, Bullet was already prepared. With his high-frequency vibrating spear, he shattered the newly formed ice wall in one blow. You fight like a machine, but we're not like you. Don't think the same trick will work twice. Crack. The vibrating spear smashed through the ice, sending shards scattering through the air. Without the barrier, Crosstail's threads quickly ensnared the modified Wood, suspending it in midair. A flash of cold light sliced through the air. Akam leapt down, blade gleaming, and struck. Blood sprayed as the modified Wood's head was severed, and the Winter Knight reverted to its original longsword form. Akam retrieved it, intending to return it to its rightful owner. Wood. Meanwhile, Tatsumi and Leon, along with the others, concluded their battle. With the help of Shield, they located and destroyed the core of the biotype Imperial Arm 100-armed giant, ending their fight in a decisive victory. Tatsumi's fight against the drug-enhanced Dr. Stylish was initially even. However, after witnessing his ultimate masterpiece being slain by Akam and the others, Dr. Stylish fell into despair. In that moment of vulnerability, Tatsumi seized the opportunity and pierced his heart with a single strike, ending his life. With this, 3 members of the Jaggers had been lost, Sir and Dr. Stylish on one side, and Bowles, who had been assassinated by Wood and his group, on the other. Boom. The news of Bowles, Sir, and Dr. Stylish's deaths sent Asdeath into a fury. While Bowles' death could be understood, given the circumstances, any member would likely have suffered the same fate if ambushed. She found Sir and Dr. Stylish's deaths utterly foolish. Asdeath was particularly enraged because they had known about the remaining Night Raid members' movements in advance but chose to keep it to themselves. Their arrogance and desire to capture the enemy in one fell swoop ultimately led to their deaths. If Dr. Stylish had simply reported the situation in time, none of the Night Raid members would have escaped in the absence of Suzuno and Wood. But Stylish, overconfident in his creations, had made a fatal mistake, leading to such a disastrous outcome. The Night Raid hideout had already been destroyed, and finding them again within the Empire would not be an easy task. Asdeath had already defeated and incapacitated Najenda, and their base had been obliterated, yet she felt no sense of victory. Instead, she felt frustrated, as though she was being countered at every turn. This infuriated her to no end. The key to Bowles' Iron Bind is missing, and Dr. Stylish's Winter Knight has been reclaimed. This means that person has fully recovered to their peak strength. For now, the 3 of you will act together. This way, even if you encounter him, you won't be completely powerless to fight back. As for me, it's time to get serious about hunting. Assassination isn't exclusive to Night Raid. If they won't come out of hiding, I'll use other methods to force them into the open. Asdeath's anger had reached a boiling point due to Night Raid's strategy of systematically assassinating isolated members of the Jaggers. Determined to turn the tables, she decided to abandon everything else and personally take up the hunt. While the Jaggers were superior in raw power, Night Raid's advantage lay in their ability to hide, operating like executioners under the cover of darkness. Finding the scattered members of Night Raid wouldn't be easy, but forcing them to reveal themselves wasn't impossible. Edith first made a trip to the royal palace. When she emerged, she was holding a list in her hands. A compilation of names and information on several high-ranking leaders of the Revolutionary Army, obtained from the Prime Minister. Despite the Empire's corruption, it had stood for over 1,000 years and still retained a strong foundation. The Intelligence Division, though tainted by the regime's rot, was still formidable. While the Empire had long possessed this list of Revolutionary Army leaders, these individuals were heavily protected. Assassination attempts were regularly made but always ended in failure. The most successful assassin in recent memory was Akam, one of the Empire's elite 7 killers. However, even she had failed to assassinate Najenda and was successfully turned to the Revolutionary Army's side. After Rakam's defection, the Empire lacked a skilled assassin capable of carrying out such missions. As a result, the list had been left unused. When Edith approached the Prime Minister for this information, he was initially stunned but soon beamed with joy. He had once considered sending Edith to eliminate these Revolutionary Army leaders but had refrained due to her unwillingness to be commanded and her disdain for weaker opponents. Her sudden interest, however, was a delightful surprise for the Prime Minister. For all the hatred he bore for Night Raid, their actions had unexpectedly helped him by forcing Edith into this position. She was now prepared to take matters into her own hands. The Prime Minister, though outwardly greedy and corrupt, was no fool. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the true power behind the Empire. To him, Night Raid had never been a significant concern. Crushing them was merely a way to appease the noble factions within his circle. The Revolutionary Army, however, was the real threat. A thorn in his side. If Edith could eliminate their leadership, the remaining forces would crumble into disarray, and the Empire could easily crush them. Without the Revolutionary Army as a backbone, Night Raid would be nothing more than a joke. How could a handful of assassins hope to shake the 1,000-year-old empire? Chapter 436, The final members of the Juggers. Just as Wood and his group received news of Dr. Stylish and Seru's deaths, Tatsumi and the others, who had returned to their rundown hideout to rest after eliminating their targets, learned the next day about Bowles' assassination. Since they were the only ones actively opposing the Juggers in the capital, the fact that they weren't responsible for Bowles' death made the identity of the culprits quite obvious. Wood and the others are alive, as we suspected. And they're taking action in the shadows. This is fantastic. Including Bowles, the Juggers are now down to just 3 members. If we defeat them, even with Edith's strength, if we all fight together, there's no way we could lose. Having successfully eliminated Dr. Stylish and Seru and now learning that Wood and mine were still alive, Tatsumi and his comrades were overjoyed. However, when they began planning their next move and identified the remaining Juggers targets, Tatsumi and Akam both displayed uneasy expressions. Unlike Dr. Stylish and Seru, the remaining Juggers members weren't entirely evil. Kurom was a trained assassin, which was understandable. But Wave and Run were fundamentally good people, even by strict standards. Wave, a man whose personality mirrored Tatsumi's, had a strong sense of justice and kindness. Run, a former village teacher, had joined the Juggers solely to investigate the truth and avenge his fallen students. Moreover, Wave was someone Tatsumi considered a friend, and Kurom was Akam's younger sister. The thought of targeting such individuals for assassination understandably left them conflicted. If it's too difficult for you, you don't have to participate in the next mission. Once we regroup with Wood and the others, our combined strength should be enough to handle them. In the world of assassins, it wasn't uncommon for targets to turn out to be acquaintances, friends, or even family members. There was a saying among assassins, to become a true master, one must first erase all emotions. Feelings were unnecessary distractions that slowed an assassin's blade. Only when free of hesitation could one strike decisively. This was the Empire's philosophy in training assassins, and it had cost Akam her childhood friends. This harsh upbringing was also why both Akam and Kurom, trained by the Empire, appeared emotionally detached. Akam once believed the Empire's methods were correct. Until she met Najenda and the other Night Raid members. Though Night Raid was also an assassination organization, it provided bonds and warmth she had never experienced within the Empire's assassin group. With comrades like the protective Bullet and Leon, the clumsy Shield, the Tsundere Mine, the perverted Lubbock, the sharp-tongued Tatsumi, the gentle Wood, and the ever-relaxed boss Najenda, Akam came to realize that assassins didn't need to suppress their emotions to complete their missions. Fighting for one's comrades could make someone even stronger. Akam had escaped the Empire's clutches, but her sister Kurom remained trapped in its grip, standing on the opposing side. This weighed heavily on Akam's heart, far more than her companions realized. Let me take part in the next mission. I'll do everything in my power to convince her. But if persuasion fails, I won't hesitate to end her myself. Akom's declaration stunned everyone. Leon, in particular, stepped forward and gently embraced her. Akom, you don't have to go that far. There are so many of us here. You don't need to push yourself. No, I've made up my mind after careful consideration. Kurom is no longer the sister I once knew. Rather than let her continue being a tool of the Empire, it would be better to free her by ending her life. Since reuniting with Kurom, Akom had fought her twice and each time had sensed her sister's intense hatred and determination to kill her. Kurom was no longer the young girl who admired and relied on her older sister. Rather than let Kurom remain under the Empire's control, Akom decided it would be better to end her suffering herself. Akom resolved to use her sword Moras Aim, which held a secret ultimate technique. Yako. The ultimate technique of Moras Aim required the user to sacrifice something significant. This wasn't a physical transformation but rather a loss of humanity. To activate Yako, the user had to kill their closest relative or dearest friend. The technique involved slashing one's own body with Moras Aim, allowing its cursed poison to envelop them, dramatically enhancing all attributes. However, this power came at a steep price. The user would either be permanently crippled or die shortly after the battle. Nadenda had known about this technique and once considered sacrificing herself to allow Akom to activate it against the invincible Asdeath. But with Wood's unexpected strength, the plan was abandoned. Now, Akom had steeled herself. If she failed to persuade Kurom this time, she would use Moras Aim to end her life and activate Yako. She would then wield its power, despite its severe side effects, to face Asdeath, aiding her comrades in overthrowing the Empire before ending her own life. If she had to kill her sister with Moras Aim, Akom felt she no longer deserved to live. Her final act of devotion to her comrades and rebellion against the Empire would be her ultimate redemption. In that case, don't leave me out. I'll show Wave what true justice is. Tatsumi, seeing Akom's determination, refused to back down. Like Akom, Tatsumi decided that if he had to face a friend, it would be better to end things himself rather than leave it to someone else. Unbeknownst to Tatsumi and his group, while they were making their plans, their other lost comrades had already encountered Kurom and the remaining Jaggers. With the restraints of his Imperial arm removed, Wood's strength had already recovered substantially. His next goal was naturally to reclaim his Imperial arm, Winter Knight. Although they knew Dr. Stylish and Saru were dead, Wood and his group were unaware that Winter Knight had been taken by Dr. Stylish and was now in Tatsumi and the others' possession. After learning from Chelsea, using Gaia Foundation's abilities, that Asdeath had left the capital, Wood and his group decided to openly attack the Jaggers' base. The reasoning was simple: with only Wave and the remaining 3 Jaggers left, even without an Imperial arm, Wood was confident that, using the power of his Heart of the Gods, he could easily take on all 3 of them. Moreover, with Mine providing long-range support from the back, this was a situation where there was no need for complex strategies. Just a straightforward confrontation would be enough. Asdeath had just left the capital, and Wood's group was already attacking. At that moment, Wave and the others realized just how large the gap in their intelligence was. But they couldn't be blamed. Night Raid had long operated in the capital and had established its own intelligence network. On the other hand, the Jaggers, including Asdeath, had been hastily formed from various military units, so it was no surprise that their intelligence was lacking. Based on the information I have, none of you are inherently evil. Return my Winter Knight to me, and then either join us in the light or leave the capital. I'll pretend I never saw you. Though this was a bold and reckless approach, Wood's group had done their homework and had gathered some intelligence about Kurom and the others. Wave and Run were among the rare few with a strong moral compass in this world, while Kurom, though twisted, was largely a victim of the Empire's manipulation. Moreover, being Akom's younger sister, Wood felt that some leniency was in order. Tatsumi, Wood, why do you, who both have hearts full of justice, choose to rebel and bring chaos to the Empire? Wave's expression was filled with emotion as he faced Wood. In the past, he had been deeply moved by Wood's selfless act of saving the children during the battle with Asdeath, a scene that had been engraved in his memory. To be blunt, Wood had always been the hero Wave admired, powerful and yet gentle and handsome. Yet because of this admiration, Wave struggled to understand why someone like Wood, who was a paragon of justice, would become a rebel and stand in opposition to the Empire. It's simple. Wood replied. The Empire you speak of may not be as righteous as you believe. When you were serving in the Imperial Navy, you couldn't see it, but now that you've been living in the capital, is this Empire truly the one you once imagined? Wave was a young man with a strong sense of justice, but he was not foolish. The life in the capital had shown him many things he had never expected. Though the Empire had once seemed righteous to him, the reality was far different. Still, Wave had his own concerns and principles, which is why he countered Wood's words. I understand that the Empire has changed, but war isn't the only solution. If war breaks out, Many people will die. As a former member of the Imperial Navy, Wave understood the horror of war and how many lives were lost in its wake. That was why he had always tried to prevent it. How foolish. Wood scoffed. The Empire is rotten to the core. Do you still expect it to change slowly? This Empire is like a sick tree, and it has reached the point where it's beyond saving. The only solution is to bring it down and allow something new to grow from its ashes. As for your concern about war causing death, those are the people dying in the dark corners of the capital every day. Should we sympathize with the soldiers dying on the battlefield, while those weak souls who die in the shadows of the Empire remain unheard? Who will seek justice for them? Wave's expression wavered as he processed Wood's words, but before he could respond, Wood, unable to waste more time, suddenly charged forward. After all, if Asdith returned, they could be in trouble. As Wood rushed forward with his blade raised, Kiram, who had been caught off guard by the verbal exchange, quickly stepped in front of Wave, wielding her 8-rooms weapon. Clang! Wood's sword clashed with Kiram's 8-rooms in midair, sparks flying from the impact. Despite having been enhanced by the Empire's drugs, Kiram's physical abilities were still no match for Wood's. The force of the clash sent Kiram's small body flying backward like a cannonball. But just as Wood prepared to press the attack, Kiram summoned her remaining undead puppets to her aid. During the earlier assault on Nitrade's hideout, some of her puppets had been damaged. Now, only 4 remained: her childhood friend Nidra, the highly dangerous Sifman, Jeggers, a survivor of the Band tribe, and former Imperial General Locke. Of these, Jeggers, a member of the Band tribe, was the strongest and considered Kiram's greatest masterpiece. Someone she had killed in order to revive. His strength had even surpassed hers during his lifetime. Jeggers of the Band tribe, I've heard of you. Wood remarked. You were said to have been on par with the Northern Tribe Prince. But I've seen one of those so-called Prince of the Northern Tribes, and he wasn't anything special. What are you really capable of? Let me see for myself. Wood boldly advanced as the 4 undead puppets appeared in front of him, a battle-ready expression on his face. Chapter 437, The Dying Kiram. Is Wood okay? Now, with the 4 undead puppets summoned by Dead Man's March and 8 rooms, he's facing 7 opponents on his own. Far from the battlefield, Mine crouched on a high vantage point, using her Imperial Arm pumpkin to aim and waiting for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, Chelsea transformed into an eagle using Gaia Foundation and scanned the surroundings with her eagle eye, prepared to respond to any changes in the environment. When she saw Kiram summon the 4 undead puppets, turning Wood's fight from a 1-on-3 to a 1-on-7, Chelsea couldn't help but worry and ask Mine, who was perched on her back. You think he can't handle it? That's because you don't know him well enough. That guy once sparred with everyone from Nitrade except for Lubbock, and the result was that he won single-handedly against all of us. Compared to those undead puppets, I don't think Bullet and Akam are any easier to deal with. Even though Wood doesn't have his Imperial Arm now, I'm still here. Mine spoke confidently as she pulled the trigger of Pumpkin. A pink beam shot out from the distance, and former Imperial General Locke's head was instantly blown off. The so-called strongest member of the Band tribe, Jeggers, along with Natala, one of the Elite 7, barely managed to stall Wood, and were continuously overpowered. The gigantic and highly dangerous Sefman tried to ambush Wood but was immediately detected by Wood's observation hockey. With an instant transmission and moonwalk, Wood vanished in front of Natrala and Jeggers, appearing behind Defman's head, holding his sword, and slashing with a sharp, swift strike. Hyaki Goriken. One sword style. Kama Atachi. The howling wind created an incredibly sharp wind blade that effortlessly decapitated Defman's head. In less than a few moments since the battle began, 2 of Kiram's prized undead puppets were already dead. Wave, how long are you going to keep standing there like an idiot? Kiram already knew how strong Wood was, but she hadn't expected that even without his Imperial Arm, Wood could still maintain such terrifying strength. At this pace, she realized she had no chance of winning, so she had no choice but to call for help from her teammates. Run 10,000 miles flight wasn't ideal for direct combat, as it could only carry 1 person at a time, making it of limited use in this situation. Hearing his sister's shout, Wave finally snapped out of his daze. Forget the Empire and Revolutionary Army. What Wave needed to do now was protect his comrades. Shure's embodiment, Noble Chariot. With a burst of air, Wave's figure was enveloped in a powerful aura, and in the next moment, a dazzling armored warrior appeared. In terms of appearance, Noble Chariot was much more handsome than Demon's Wrath, with its sleek blue color and highly advanced equipment, complete with a cape billowing in the wind. The jet thrusters on his back activated, propelling Wave forward at incredible speed, and in an instant, he shot toward Wood, throwing a powerful punch at his face. Facing the incoming punch, Wood didn't dodge. Instead, his arm was covered with a black substance, and he threw a punch of his own to meet Wave's attack. Boom. The two fists collided midair, creating a violent shockwave that cracked the ground beneath them and sent debris flying. To Wave's disbelief, as their fists connected, he was hit with an enormous shockwave that sent his body sliding backward several meters. Despite using his Imperial arm and charging forward with the momentum, it was Wave who was knocked back instead of Wood. Wood was incredibly strong, something Wave could admit. But this was ridiculous. Wood was just a normal human, and Wave was wearing an Imperial armor. Yet in their fist clash, Wave even felt Wood's punch was harder than his own armor. And despite wearing the armor that should have enhanced his physical attributes, he was knocked back by a bare-handed punch. Wave's really terrible. Kurum's sarcastic remark made Wave feel embarrassed, but he had long gotten used to her harsh words. He shook it off and continued charging toward Wood. Was Wave weak? Far from it. Even in the Jaggers, his combat prowess was among the top 3. Kurum's constant teasing aside, she had just experienced firsthand how powerful Wood's physical capabilities were. Because Run felt that his skills weren't suited for the current battle, he decided to find Mine and the others to provide long-range support. Meanwhile, Wood faced Wave, Kurum, Natala, and Jaggers alone, yet he remained completely at ease, expertly handling them. His superb swordsmanship, flawless body techniques to cover any gaps, exceptional observation hockey, and sharp reflexes were combined with the powerful armament hockey, which enhanced his attack and defense. Even without an Imperial arm, Wood was a nearly perfect fighter, seemingly without any weaknesses. He suppressed Kurum with his sword, fought barehanded with the armored Wave, and effortlessly overwhelmed the undead puppets, Natrala and Jaggers, who kept trying to find openings but were continually crushed. Both Kurum's Dead Man's March and Wave's Noble Chariot were Imperial arms, and every use of an Imperial arm came at a high cost to the body. Wave's situation was difficult, but Kurum had already summoned 2 undead puppets, and the effort to maintain such high-intensity combat was pushing her body to its limits. After a clash with Wood's sword, Kurum staggered back, coughing up a large amount of blood. The undead puppets she had been controlling, Natala and Jaggers, dropped to the ground like puppets with their strings cut. Seeing the black-haired girl suddenly cough up blood and fall to the ground, Wave instantly exploded with power. Not only did he punch Wood away, but he also picked up Kurum, who had collapsed, and was ready to make his escape. If you don't want her to die here, it's better to put her down now. Feeling the numbness in his arm, Wood couldn't help but sigh. The punch Wave had just thrown to protect his sister was at least 2 or 3 times stronger than before. Truly, men always seem to show incredible strength when it comes to the women they like. Upon hearing Wood's words, Wave, who had been carrying Kurum, suddenly stopped and looked at Wood with a puzzled expression. You don't think the reason your sister is coughing up blood is because of me, do you? After all, she is Akam's sister. I've been letting her off easy all this time. The reason she's in this state is simply because of her own physical condition. After hearing Wood's words, Wave, who had not fully understood the situation, showed even more confusion. As her comrade, you don't know anything about her, do you? From how much you seem to care for her, I thought you two were lovers. But turns out, you're just a scumbag ogling her looks and lusting after her body? Coming from a rural area, Wave couldn't handle Wood's teasing so easily, and he blushed furiously. He quickly began to explain himself. Kurum is Akam's sister. She also comes from the Empire's assassination unit, and unlike other units, the Empire's assassination department is one of the darkest places even within the Empire. To cultivate exceptional assassins, they design scenarios where the assassins are forced to kill their own friends and family, erasing their emotions in the process. Both Akam and Kurum are products of this. Compared to Kurum, Akam has a great talent and was chosen as one of the Elite 7. After Akam defected from the Empire, Kurum chose to accept the drug injections from the Empire to enhance her body, eventually entering the Elite 7. The Empire's drugs can enhance abilities and make one's life force so strong that you only die when your head is cut off or your heart pierced. However, the side effects are immense. The drugs have a great dependency and strong corrosive properties, constantly eroding the body. As you can imagine, the battle earlier pushed her body to its limits. If you try to take her now, she won't survive. Wave didn't think Wood would lie, not just because of his trust in Wood's character, but also because there was no need for Wood to lie at this point. Looking at Kurum's current state, it was clear that escaping from Wood's grasp wasn't going to be an easy task. Moreover, Wave had observed that Kurum didn't have any obvious external injuries. She hadn't even sustained any wounds. The sudden blood loss seemed to align with what Wood had said. Mr. Wood, what should I do to save Kurum? Though they were enemies, and they had just fought, looking at Kurum in his arms, growing weaker and weaker, Wave found himself at a loss and had no choice but to seek Wood's help. Undeniably, ever since Kurum joined his team, she had constantly been sarcastic toward him. But after learning about her tragic past, Wave felt deep sympathy for her. Plus, She was an important comrade to him. A girl who should be in the prime of her youth, enduring so much pain in the past, should not die here. With your strength, you probably can't save her, but perhaps I can still do something. Upon hearing Wood's words, Wade immediately showed an expression of excitement. Without hesitation, he knelt in front of Wood and pleaded. Mr. Wood, please save Kuram. I don't want to lose another important comrade. If possible, I'm willing to give up my life in exchange for hers. Wade had always been a man of deep emotions, and with his special feelings for Kuram, he was now even using honorifics to beg Wood. Don't you think your request is a bit too much? From a standpoint, we should be enemies. Now you're asking an enemy to save your comrade. No matter how sincere you are, I don't think it's going to work. Hearing Wood's words, Wade looked serious and said. If I wanted to escape no matter what, I'd have a good chance of getting away from you, Mr. Wood. But if you can save Kuram, I'll commit seppuku on the spot to trade my life for hers. Wade's meaning was clear. If he had focused only on escaping, Wood's greatest victory would have been one death and one escape. Himself and Kuram. But now, by giving up on escaping and offering to commit seppuku if Wood saves Kuram, Wade was making the point that nothing had changed in terms of the outcome of the battle. The difference was simply that the person who died would be him instead of Kuram, but Wade didn't regret this at all. Although the outcome for me doesn't change, it's troublesome, and you don't think that saving someone who's already on the brink of death won't cost me anything, right? And another thing, you're overestimating your own strength. If I really wanted to stop you, even with all your power, you wouldn't be able to leave here. Upon hearing Wood's response, Wade felt like all the strength had left his body. He slumped down where he stood. Wood's words were clear. His proposal would be a loss for Wood, and there was no way to move him. The negotiation was over. Just as Wade was looking at Kuram, whose face had grown pale and whose breath was growing weaker, feeling a deep sense of regret and sorrow, a soft green light suddenly enveloped Kuram's body. The sudden change startled Wade, who had been lost in thought. Though he didn't know what the green light was, he could clearly see that under the soft green glow, Kuram's complexion was slowly returning to a healthier shade. When Wade looked up, he was surprised to see that it was Wood who was using this power on Kuram, the same person who had just rejected his plea. Mr. Wood, you. Quit talking. Who told you that this girl is Akam's sister? If I just let her die in front of me, Akam probably won't let me off the hook if we meet again. That girl's imperial arm is 1/kill, Muramasa. If she targets me, someone like me would be in serious danger. Hearing Wood's words, Wade looked at him in confusion, about to straightforwardly express that Wood was far stronger than Akam. But he was interrupted by a pink-haired girl who suddenly spoke up. You'd better keep quiet and let him save face. This guy is prideful, and he's just finding an excuse to save her. Chapter 438, One pack of snacks and the empire is so old? The sudden appearance of the pink-haired Lilai, aside from mine, could naturally not have been anyone else. And seeing her appear with Jagger's run, it was clear that they had made some kind of agreement with Chelsea and the others, which is why they didn't continue the fight. Being called stubborn by Tsundere Lilai, Wood was admittedly feeling quite frustrated inside. However, caught in the act, he really had no strength left to refute her. Under the greenish glow enveloping Kuram, her complexion had started to gradually turn a healthier shade. However, at a certain moment, she suddenly seemed to suffer some kind of backlash, and her body, which had been lying down, suddenly vomited a large amount of blood again, staining her black sailor uniform red. With this backlash, Kuram's condition worsened once more, and her life force weakened again. Mr. Wood, what's going on? Seeing his sister's condition worsen, Wade couldn't help but panic, looking at Wood. He had just seen Kuram's condition improve, so why had such a thing happened? After years of relying on the Empire's drugs, her condition is even worse than I imagined. This world lacked magical energy, and with Wood's level of magic, while he could barely use low-level healing spells, it seemed that these healing spells were quite ineffective in this situation. TCH, this time I've really taken a huge loss. If I save this girl and she still refuses to recover, I won't be so nice next time. With a gust of wind bursting from Wood's body, the strong air pressure even pushed mine and the others back. When they opened their eyes again against the force of the wind, they were shocked to see a row of silvery, mysterious runes glowing on Wood's chest. The runes inscribed with Heart of God shone brightly, piercing through Wood's clothes, emitting a brilliant silver light. At the same time, Wood's aura expanded geometrically in an instant. Feeling Wood's surging aura, Wade finally realized that Wood had not been exaggerating earlier. If he truly got serious, there would be no possibility of escaping from him, no matter what Wade did. Seeing Wood use the power of Heart of God, some of the more excited people, like Mine and Chelsea, were also taken aback. After Dr. Fashion and So died, Mine learned that the dead bullet wasn't actually dead and was saved by Wood. After persistent questioning, Wood revealed the healing power he used to save Bullet and also claimed that Heart of God was an Imperial arm. While it had never been seen before in history for someone to wield two Imperial arms, it didn't mean it was entirely impossible. Considering Wood's monstrous genius, both Chelsea and mine easily accepted this explanation. According to Wood's earlier explanation, Heart of God was a simple yet brutal Imperial arm that could directly multiply one's abilities or attributes. Although the effect was simple, it was incredibly powerful, and such great power came with an equally enormous cost. The cost of using this Imperial arm was none other than one's life force. Once the life force was exhausted, death would follow. This was also the reason Wood kept this Imperial arm hidden and rarely used it. Now, seeing Wood use Heart of God, mine and Chelsea were naturally quite excited, as, in their view, it was a completely unnecessary thing to do. Wood, are you crazy? You're wasting your life force like this. Bullet, I can understand, after all, he's an important comrade of ours, but this girl. Though she's Akam's sister, she's also our enemy. If you can save her with normal methods, then do so. If you can't, just let it be. There's no need to use your life force to save her. Upon hearing mine shout, Run and Wave finally understood what kind of price Wood was paying to intervene and how much determination he had made. Honestly, given their relationship, they should have tried to stop him from going this far, since they weren't in a position to let him do this. But looking at the weak Kiram, Run and Wave couldn't bring themselves to tell him to stop. After Heart of God empowered the healing magic, what was originally a weak healing spell was suddenly amplified many times over. The faint shadow of the Goddess of Light even appeared in the air, causing mine and the others to feel as though they were witnessing a miracle. Using Heart of God for healing consumed far more life force than using it in combat. In battle, Wood could use Heart of God for a moment, such as when he slashed with a sword, without needing to maintain it for long periods. But healing was different. To maintain high-intensity healing, the amplification of Heart of God had to stay active, and the life force consumed was far more than what it would be in battle. As the enhanced healing magic continued to heal Kiram, her life force gradually stabilized. Even the lingering side effects of the Empire's drugs in her body were finally purified by Wood's purification ability. In exchange, Wood, who had exhausted much of his life force, now had hair completely turned silver-white, achieving the accomplishment of a prematurely graying head at a young age. Kiram, having successfully recovered, slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Wood and mine and the others, her body reflexively gripped 8 rooms, taking a combat stance. But before she could make a move, her hands were caught by her comrades, Run and Wave, who shook their heads at her. The 3-No girl tilted her head in confusion, but across from her, the pink-haired Lilai, seeing Kiram's actions, couldn't hold back her anger and immediately began her verbal assault. I've already told you, there's no need to pay such a huge price to save her. Even if she is Akam's sister, so what? A fool who was used by the Empire, and still takes pride in it. A scum who wanted to kill her own sister. How could you expect her to show mercy to her savior? Upon hearing Akam's name from mine's mouth, Kiram's face instantly darkened. She was about to act, but Wave quickly stopped her and explained what had just happened. A few minutes later, the black-haired girl, who had no emotions, finally understood what had happened after she lost consciousness earlier. Looking again at Wood, who had aged prematurely, Kiram's eyes were filled with guilt. After bowing deeply in thanks to Wood, she raised her 8 rooms high. As if he had anticipated what the girl would do, Wood forcefully dragged his exhausted body and suddenly appeared in front of Kiram, grabbing her wrist with his hand. You want to end your life without asking my opinion? Do you know that to save you, I consumed most of my life force? It's not for just a simple bow of gratitude. Seeing the determined look in Kiram's eyes and her movement to draw the knife, Wood knew she intended to end her life. The girl was clearly someone with integrity. Since she was saved by Wood, she obviously wouldn't repay kindness with enmity. But as an Imperial agent, betraying her country like her sister, Akam, was something she couldn't bring herself to do either. Although I'm grateful that you saved me, I am an Imperial soldier. I won't choose to betray my country. I don't care whether you betray or not. I paid a huge price to pull you back from the edge of death. If you want to die, I won't stop you, but at least pay the treatment fee before you die. Don't think you can just get away with a bow. You at least owe me your most valuable thing. Wood couldn't accept the idea of someone committing suicide after he spent so much of his life force to save them. This wasn't just a bad deal, it was one where he'd lose everything. Wood, you damned pervert. Hearing Wood demand that the girl pay with her most valuable possession, mine, not knowing what she had thought, suddenly blushed and scolded him angrily. Wave, on the other hand, was confused and silently wondered what Kiram's most valuable thing could be. The 3-No girl, after tilting her head and thinking for a brief moment, hesitated and pulled out a bag of snacks from her pocket. Her face was filled with struggle as she placed it into Wood's hand. Wood. Your most valuable possession. Is this bag of snacks? After a brief moment of surprise, Wood shrugged it off. Considering that she was Akom's sister, it seemed entirely normal for this to happen. However, Wood clearly wasn't going to let Kirom off with just a bag of snacks. He handed it back to her and said, "What I want as payment for the treatment is your freedom. From now on, you will serve me. But I've already told you, I'm Kirom from the Empire's assassination unit. I won't." Upon hearing Wood's words, Kirom's face showed a stubborn expression as she tried to protest, but her words were interrupted by Wood. "Don't get it wrong. The Kirom from the Empire's assassination unit already died earlier. Now, your second life was given to you by me. I even purged the drugs the Empire injected into you. Now, you have no ties to the Empire. To be loyal to the one who gave you a second chance at life. What's wrong with that?" Upon hearing Wood's words, Kirom's body visibly trembled, and then she fell into a long silence. Meanwhile, Mine and Chelsea, who had been nearby, finally understood why Wood had gone to such lengths. He wasn't just saving Akom's sister physically, but was also saving her emotionally and spiritually. TCH, Wood really treats Akom well. He's done all this just for her sister. Realizing Wood's intentions, Mine felt a bit jealous. However, Chelsea, who had a more cynical side, couldn't resist throwing in a comment, maybe he's not just doing it for Akom. Look, Kirom is quite cute, right? Not only is she young, but she is also quite well endowed. And she looks like the type who would obey orders. If this girl were to serve Wood, do you think he might give her some strange commands? Upon hearing Chelsea's devilish whisper, Mine's mind began to wander, and her face turned a noticeable shade of red as she looked at Wood with an expression that seemed to view him as a scumbag. Meanwhile, Wood, who had no idea that he had somehow become the perverse character in someone's fantasies, was still busy negotiating with the 3-No girl. "I might take a small loss, but if you agree to follow me, I'll provide you with high-end snacks every day, and once a week, I'll take you to a luxurious patisserie in the Imperial Capital's noble district where you can eat all you want." Idiot, who would accept such a condition? Black-hearted as ever, Mine was quick to show her disdain, thinking Kirom wouldn't possibly accept such a ridiculous offer. After all, it seemed laughable to her. But soon, Mine was slapped in the face, and it was a big slap. To Mine's surprise, Kirom, without hesitation, extended her hand to Wood and high-fived him, saying, "Deal. You won't go back on your word, will you? The snacks and all you can eat, right?" "Of course. I, Wood, am a man of my word. From today, you're no longer part of the Empire. You're now exclusively my bodyguard." A bag of snacks a day was hardly worth much. As for the patisserie, Wood could go to old Arthur's shop and eat for free without paying a dime. As for Kirom's appetite, it wasn't Wood's concern, but rather old Arthur's. However, given that Wood had helped him out over the years, Arthur probably wouldn't mind. When you calculate it this way, Wood was essentially using a daily snack as the price to get an elite fighter as powerful as Akom on his side. This deal was a massive win. As for Mine, seeing Wood and Kirom high-fiving, her expression was one of pure shock. She had previously thought Kirom was loyal to the Empire, but now she saw the girl was willing to betray it for a pack of snacks. Where did her loyalty and sense of duty go? Chapter 439, as Death pierces through the Revolutionary Army. The additional condition of snacks was, of course, just a catalyst. While Kirom had some flaws in her personality, her integrity and loyalty were still intact. The primary reason she chose to leave the Empire and follow Wood was mostly due to Wood's earlier words. That's right. The Kirom who belonged to the Empire's assassination unit had died in the previous battle. The life she had now was saved at the immense cost of Wood's own energy. Now, she had been reborn and should be freed from the Empire's control. As for the past grievances, Kirom no longer wanted to dwell on them. Now, all she wanted was to repay Wood for his previous kindness and return the favor for the price he paid to save her. The reason Kirom had hesitated and remained silent earlier was because Wood and her sister, Akom, were comrades. Kirom didn't know how to face Akom if they met again. However, her contemplation, to Wood and the others, had seemed like hesitation and indecisiveness. When Kirom finally made up her mind, she suddenly heard the additional conditions that Wood had set. As a seasoned food lover, how could she turn down the offer of food that came to her door? So, Kirom readily agreed to Wood's proposal, even stressing that Wood should not regret it. "Well then, young man, what is your decision? Will you betray us here, or will you be taken down here?" Run had joined the Jaggers to collect intelligence and avenge his students. Chelsea, meanwhile, had found information about the wild hounds in a noble's household during her intelligence gathering on the Jaggers. That was why she had made a deal with Run, agreeing to stop helping the Empire fight the Revolutionary Army, while Chelsea would provide Run with the information she knew. The original trio was now split. Run had decided not to continue assisting the Empire's oppressive actions, while Kiram had more decisively become Wood's follower. Now only Wave remained, looking awkward. Hearing Wood, who was younger than him, but still calling him young man, Wave felt embarrassed. Although his confidence was strong, he had firmly declared that he wouldn't betray the Empire, and now suddenly choosing to defect seemed to go against his integrity. He wasn't like Kiram, who had been saved by Wood, and unlike Kiram, Wave still had a certain sense of belonging to the Empire, having once been part of the Imperial Navy. About this matter, could I return and discuss it with General Esdeath before making a decision? Seeing Wood, mine, and Kiram closing in on him, Wave awkwardly asked. Kiram-chan, your first mission is here. Capture this guy alive. As for what to do with him, we'll decide later. Upon hearing Wood's command, Kiram sighed with relief. If Wood had ordered her to kill Wave, like the Empire would have, Kiram wouldn't have known how to choose. Just like Wave had protected her earlier, Kiram also considered Wave an important comrade. If possible, she didn't want to harm him. But as a soldier, she believed orders came above all else. If Wood had forced her to kill Wave, she probably would have followed through, but she would likely have turned Wave into a dead soldier's army puppet, keeping him by her side forever. Fortunately, Wood was fundamentally different from the Empire. He had gone through great lengths to save Kiram, and he wouldn't turn her into a killing machine again. Otherwise, what was the difference between him and the Empire? Wave, don't struggle. After all, you're so weak. If you resist and I accidentally kill you, you'll just become another puppet in Dead Soldier's army. Looking at Kiram, holding Dead Soldier's army while steadily approaching, Wave's face grew darker. He wanted to turn and escape, but Wood and Mine had already appeared behind him without him noticing. Kiram-chan, calm down. We're teammates. Even if you betrayed us, you shouldn't be this decisive about it. Don't you think you should show some mercy and let me go? After all, we've known each other for a long time, right? Wave, noticing how much more emotional Kiram seemed than before, was both happy for the girl but also felt how dear his situation was. TCH, just former teammates. Now, I'm nothing more than Wood-sama's sword. And this is Wood-sama's first order. If I don't do it well, he might think I'm useless. There was no doubt that Wave was captured in the end. Wood and the others didn't even have to act. With the help of Kiram and the two Dead Soldiers' army puppets, Nitra and Hunter, they easily subdued the already exhausted Wave. Having been pulled back from the brink of death, Kiram, now freed from the Empire's drug-induced side effects, was more agile and quick. However, her previously absurd vitality was now gone. But the girl didn't mind at all and remarked that she now felt quite light. The battle between Wave and Kiram didn't have the intention of killing either side, and with Wave realizing escape was hopeless, he quickly became Kiram's defeated opponent. Meanwhile, while Wood's team emerged victorious, cutting through the Empire's encirclement and successfully breaking out, Akam and her team encountered serious problems. They had originally planned to take action against Kiram and the others tonight, but things had changed unexpectedly. Esdeath, enraged, had used the list of Revolutionary Army leaders provided by the minister to begin a large-scale assassination operation. Compared to the usual assassination methods of Night Raid, which used the cover of night, Esdeath's assassination method was far more direct. She didn't bother hiding or following any plans. Instead, she marched straight into the enemy's house during the day and easily massacred an entire Revolutionary Army leader's family before leaving without a care. Unlike Night Raid, which would take cautious steps and rest between strikes, Esdeath would immediately move on to the next target after killing one. Her reckless, swaggering assassinations enraged the entire Revolutionary Army, which dispatched forces to ambush her. However, the result was that the Revolutionary Army leader she was supposed to protect were still killed, and the soldiers who came to ambush her were all turned into ice statues. Esdeath, although alone, was so powerful that her secret technique, Ice Storm General, could summon an army of ice cavalry in an instant, making her combat prowess far exceed that of the Empire's elite forces. Previously, the Revolutionary Army's high-ranking officials had only heard rumors of Esdeath's terror from Najenda, and their understanding of her was based on incomplete intelligence. Many of them had dismissed her as an exaggeration. This greatly exaggerated her power to highlight Najenda and Night Raid's achievements. When Esdeath finally arrived at the Revolutionary Army's doorstep, the high-ranking members of the army finally realized that Najenda hadn't been exaggerating when she warned them about Esdeath's strength. In fact, she had even underestimated it. This was not the kind of opponent that could be dealt with by 50,000 elite soldiers and 10 Imperial arms wielders. To set up an ambush against Esdeath, the Revolutionary Army had sent 3 Imperial arms wielders and 100,000 soldiers. However, within just a few dozen minutes, Those 3 Imperial arms wielders were turned into ice sculptures, and the 100,000 soldiers were either killed by ice cavalry or scattered into ice shards. In the original story, during the final battle in the Imperial capital, Asdeath single-handedly fought against over 10 Imperial arms wielders and a million-strong army, and even had enough energy left to fight against Akam, who was using cursed poison. She repeatedly suppressed Akam, demonstrating just how formidable her strength truly was. Najenda, didn't you say that if we had 50,000 elite soldiers, along with 10 real Imperial arms wielders, we could defeat that monster? Now, we've lost nearly 10 Imperial arms wielders and over 100,000 soldiers, yet that demon hasn't even been harmed. Asdeath's unrivaled strength truly terrified the Revolutionary Army's high-ups. At the pace Asdeath was going, if they gave her a little more time, she would easily be able to crush the entire Revolutionary Army single-handedly. Even though they were currently in the heart of the Revolutionary Army's headquarters, they couldn't be sure they were completely safe. What I said before was 50,000 elite soldiers, not just regular soldiers. And out of the 10 true Imperial arms wielders, there had to be Akam, who wields the one-cut-kill Imperial arm, Muramasa. Asdeath easily wiped out 400,000 of the foreign army in the north. The physical strength and combat ability of the foreign races are generally stronger than ours. Do you think a mere 100,000 soldiers can stop her? At this point, Najenda's face looked grim. She hadn't expected that Asdeath, who had always been so proud, would take the initiative to attack the Revolutionary Army. The location of the Revolutionary Army's headquarters had always been a secret. But as more and more Revolutionary Army high-ranking members fell to Asdeath's hands, the location of the headquarters was bound to be exposed sooner or later. After all, no one could guarantee that, in the face of death, a person would be able to keep their mouth shut. Even the foreign prince in the north, who was once praised to the heavens, ended up on his knees before Asdeath, begging for mercy like a beaten dog. But the threat Asdeath posed to the Revolutionary Army was undeniable. If things continued like this, it was only a matter of time before Asdeath attacked the Revolutionary Army's headquarters. And it wasn't just Najenda's pessimism. If Asdeath reached the headquarters, there was a very real possibility that the Revolutionary Army would be crushed completely. Asdeath came alone, and she could leave whenever she wanted. No one could stop her. But the Revolutionary Army, having spent years establishing the headquarters, couldn't afford to let Asdeath go unchecked. If Asdeath resorted to guerrilla tactics, attacking the headquarters in waves, she could destroy everything in 3 days. All of the Revolutionary Army's years of effort would be for nothing. If we let her keep doing this, all our efforts will be wasted. We had the ability to face the Empire head-on, and the timing was right. But if we let that mad woman keep wasting our resources, not only will we not overthrow the Empire, we'll be lucky if we can even survive in the face of the Empire. Didn't Najenda say before? If we have 50,000 elite soldiers, along with 10 true Imperial arms wielders, including Akam, we could defeat Asdeath. We still have 50,000 elite soldiers, and as for Imperial arms wielders, we have a few left at the headquarters. With Akam and the rest of Nitrade, we should be fine, right? Due to Asdeath's overwhelming attack, the Revolutionary Army convened an emergency meeting. The high-ranking members, feeling helpless, could only place their hopes on Najenda's earlier words. As a former colleague and friend, they felt that Najenda was one of the few people who understood Asdeath the most. No one was doubting Asdeath's strength anymore, they just hoped that Najenda could quickly contact Akam and Nitrade, so they could come and stop this monster. Whether the combined force of 50,000 elite soldiers and the 10 Imperial arms wielders would be enough to counter Asdeath, Najenda herself wasn't certain. While she was familiar with Asdeath, she had never seen Asdeath fight seriously. Wood had fought Asdeath twice with devastating results, but unfortunately, Najenda had not been present for either of those battles. Facing Asdeath was extremely dangerous, but right now, Najenda had no other choice. If the Revolutionary Army fell, they would lose their final opportunity to overthrow the Empire. So, in the end, Najenda, under the anxious gazes of her comrades, contacted Akam and the rest of Nitrade, providing them with a location and hoping they would hurry to support them. Akam and the others, who had originally planned to take action against the remaining Jaggers members, were also taken aback when they received Najenda's request for help. They hadn't expected that, before they could even act, Asdeath had already infiltrated their base. With the situation becoming urgent, the priority shifted. The danger to the Revolutionary Army's headquarters was far greater than dealing with Kuromand Wave. If the headquarters, which served as the Revolutionary Army's stronghold, was lost, their plan to overthrow the Empire would be in ruins. So, after receiving Najenda's request, Datsumi and the others quickly changed their plans and rushed to the Revolutionary Army's headquarters. Chapter 440, Night Raid arrives at the headquarters after turning another mansion into a frozen wasteland and effortlessly transforming a certain individual into a nice sculpture before shattering them into pieces, as Deeth displayed a satisfied expression. The Revolutionary Army's high-ranking members were far weaker than she had imagined. Even the elite soldiers of the Revolutionary Army were, in her eyes, nothing more than useless trash. The few Imperial arms wielders from the Revolutionary Army who had appeared earlier were also unremarkable characters in Deeth's eyes. However, just a moment ago, she finally obtained the information she needed from a recently killed Revolutionary Army officer, the exact location of the Revolutionary Army's headquarters. Deeth had been doing all this just to force out the Night Raid members, who were hiding like rats. Unfortunately, even though she had already eliminated many of the Revolutionary Army's members, the Night Raid members continued to hide and did not show themselves. Occasionally, a few Imperial arms wielders would appear, but Deeth regarded them as inconsequential. "I don't believe this. Once I destroy the Revolutionary Army's headquarters, you all still won't come out." Since Deeth began hunting the Revolutionary Army's high-ranking members, the Revolutionary Army had been closely monitoring her every move. When they noticed that she had wiped out a high-ranking officer's mansion and was now heading straight for the headquarters, the Revolutionary Army's leaders knew that their headquarters location had likely been exposed. Damn it. I knew Phil was unreliable. He knew he was doomed and still couldn't even keep his mouth shut. The information he leaked is going to drag the entire Revolutionary Army into damnation. That coward, even as he died, dragged everyone else down with him. Deeth's actions made it clear, she had learned the exact location of the Revolutionary Army's headquarters and was heading straight there. The high-ranking members of the Revolutionary Army had hoped that their comrades would be true men, keeping secrets even when facing death. The list of high-ranking members held by the Empire was very limited, so if Deeth eliminated everyone on the list without obtaining any useful information, the headquarters would be safe. After all, as a group of rebels, the headquarters location was extremely secretive. Without relevant personnel revealing it, finding the headquarters was not an easy task. Even the Night Raid members, apart from Najenda, and the injured Bullet and Sarah who were resting, as well as Chelsea who had left, did not know the exact location of the headquarters. As long as the headquarters location was not exposed, Deeth, after eliminating all the targets on her list, would eventually be left powerless. Though the Revolutionary Army had been significantly weakened, they were not in an irreversible situation. Given a few more years of recovery, they still had a chance to overthrow the Empire. Unfortunately, as often happens, things did not go as planned. The human condition was as unpredictable as ever. No one could guarantee whether someone might betray them under extreme circumstances. Even one such individual could spoil everything, like a single rat ruining a pot of porridge. At this point, what's the use of blaming that guy? He is already dead, and he has been shattered into pieces. Now we should be considering how to save ourselves. Should we stay here and fight, or should we retreat? Are you kidding? There's only one person on the other side, and we're supposed to retreat? How can we talk about overthrowing the Empire like this? Even if we retreat, where can we go? We've been operating here for years. If we leave, what happens to our equipment, food supplies, and research technology? Are we supposed to let the Empire take everything? The Revolutionary Army's high-ranking members were divided on whether to stay and fight or retreat, each faction arguing their point. However, in terms of numbers, the majority wanted to stay and fight. The Revolutionary Army had little room for retreat. If they abandoned their base, they might be able to save their army, but many strategic resources at the headquarters could not be moved. Moreover, their army was so large that their daily consumption of food was absurd. They could survive for 2 or 3 days, but what would happen after that? Even without the Empire's intervention, their large population could starve to death. Given the situation, it might be better to go all out and fight for survival rather than retreat. Najenda, haven't the Night Raid members arrived yet? Najenda, being one of the Revolutionary Army's high-ranking members, naturally had a say in the meeting. She was also one of the proponents of fighting, especially since, as a former general of the Empire, she understood the consequences of abandoning their base. As she was contemplating the situation, one of her comrades suddenly patted her on the shoulder and asked, and the eyes of everyone else immediately turned toward her. The hopes of the majority of the pro-war faction rested on Night Raid arriving. In the past, they had not been impressed by Night Raid's achievements, dismissing them as merely assassinating the fat, helpless nobles in the imperial capital. However, after confronting Deeth, they now realized just how formidable Night Raid was. In facing a monster like Deeth, Night Raid had repeatedly succeeded and caused setbacks. The high-ranking members of the Revolutionary Army were well aware that Night Raid had faced Deeth head-on multiple times and managed to escape unscathed. Meanwhile, the Revolutionary Army had lost every attempt to ambush Deeth. Report. General Bullet has arrived with a group of people claiming to be his companions at the checkpoint. Should we let them through? Previously asking Najenda when Akam and the others would arrive, the Revolutionary Army member, hearing the soldiers' report, immediately replied with a happy expression, "Let them through, let them through. There are people. Get someone to lead them here." The news of night raid members arriving at the Revolutionary Army's headquarters greatly relieved many of the Revolutionary Army's high-ranking members. Night raid's track record was impressive. Even if they couldn't defeat Tasdeeth, they should still be able to handle a confrontation with her. The Revolutionary Army was not short on personnel, but what they lacked were powerful combatants. After all, numerical advantage meant nothing against true strength, something Tasdeeth had already proven. Thank you, Night Raid, for all your efforts to overthrow the corrupt empire. If not for your hard work in the imperial capital, we wouldn't have gained this much advantage so quickly. This was Tatsumi's first time arriving at the Revolutionary Army's headquarters, and it was also his first time seeing so many important figures. He was feeling quite nervous. Although he had matured a lot from his experiences, he was still just a country boy at heart. The high-ranking Revolutionary Army members in front of him were, in the empire, probably military ministers or generals. To be greeted so politely by them was something he hadn't expected. Bullet and Seru also felt strange about the attitude of the Revolutionary Army's high-ranking officials. When they had previously returned to the headquarters to recuperate, these people hadn't been so polite. The situation is worse than I informed you. Someone leaked the location of the headquarters to Tasdeeth, and now she's heading straight here. As of now, the Revolutionary Army has no forces that can resist her. We can only rely on you all," said Najenda. These words clarified for Bullet why the Revolutionary Army's attitude had shifted so dramatically. It turned out that they had already been under attack, and now they finally realized just how difficult Night Raid's efforts had been. "Why are only you few here? Where are Wood, Mame, and Chelsea? Didn't you say they were fine in your last report?" Since the headquarters was attacked, Najenda had been worried. But the letter from Leona had put her mind at ease. All members of Night Raid, except for the self-destructive Suzuno, managed to escape the battle. When Leona's letter confirmed that Wood and the others were safe, Najenda had breathed a sigh of relief. However, now that Night Raid had arrived at the headquarters, but Wood and the others were absent, she started to doubt whether Leona had lied to protect her. "Rabak, tell me, what's going on with Wood? Don't try to deceive me, you know the consequences." Since she was worried that Leona and Akam had kept things from her, Najenda turned to her loyal subordinate Rabak for answers. "Boss, Leona really wasn't lying. Wood and the others are fine. They even assassinated a Jaeger member carrying the key to the Imperial tool. Wood should have already broken free from his restraints. But for some reason, Wood, Mame, and Chelsea have been acting separately and haven't planned to meet up with us. I think that guy's just caught up in women, he's probably enjoying himself with his harem and doesn't plan to work with us anymore." Rabak first confirmed the truth of Leona's letter before, as usual, making fun of his friend Wood. If Wood doesn't come, then things will get troublesome. Knowing that Wood and the others were safe, Najenda felt relieved. However, the fact that Wood didn't join Tatsumi and the others at the headquarters made her a little disappointed. She had previously calculated that to stop Tasdeeth, they would need 50,000 elite soldiers and 10 true Imperial arms wielders, including Akam. This was a conservative estimate, and whether it could actually succeed was uncertain. With Akam still unable to use her final technique due to not having killed her beloved and closest friends, and Tasdeeth's actual strength surpassing her earlier estimates, Najenda couldn't be sure if Akam and the others could stop someone like Tasdeeth. While the Revolutionary Army headquarters was crucial, Najenda didn't want to put Akam and the others in danger. If they were confident they could defeat Tasdeeth, then fine, but if not, what difference would it make if they went to their deaths? "Boss, let us go deal with Tasdeeth. We have no other choice now." Seeing Najenda hesitating, Leona and the others immediately volunteered. They had long prepared themselves for death when they chose this path. Even if there was a chance to avoid battle, they were determined not to run away anymore. To overthrow the corrupt empire, Tasdeeth was always going to be a major obstacle. Now that she was alone, this was their chance. Though Tasdeeth was incredibly strong, Night Raid was not weak either. Who would win in the end was not set in stone. Since the Revolutionary Army's survival depended on it, the high-ranking officials generously allowed Night Raid to lead the charge. Walking in front of a well-organized army, Tatsumi had a somewhat distant expression on his face. He couldn't help but recall how he first left his village with 2 friends, aiming to join the Empire's army and, one day, return to his village as a general. But he never imagined that he would not become an Imperial soldier but rather a rebel assassin. His 2 friends had been tragically killed. In the end, Tatsumi did become a general, though not in the Empire's army, but as a general of the Revolutionary Army. "Seiyu, can you see?" I've fulfilled our shared wish. Now, what I must do is overthrow this decaying empire, so that people like you will never have to suffer again. Night Raid arrived at the Revolutionary Army's headquarters with a full force of 100,000 elite soldiers, only to encounter Asdeath, who was heading toward the headquarters. When the members of Night Raid and Asdeath saw each other, they both wore the same expression, one filled with intense battle intent. Asdeath, raised in the borderlands, had the strength to hunt dangerous beasts from a young age. She could easily adapt to even the harshest environments. Despite having wandered for days and experiencing several ambushes, her aura remained at its peak, in a state of full power. Upon seeing the Night Raid members and the mass of 100,000 elite soldiers, she didn't show any sign of relaxation. Instead, she slowly drew her sword from her waist, licked her lips, and said with a fierce look. Finally, some worthy opponents. I thought you'd keep hiding forever. Chapter 441, Wood, we can ambush their base too. On one side stood 100,000 elite soldiers, bolstered by the presence of 10 true Tegu wielders, including members of Night Raid. On the other side, there was a single woman clad in military uniform, armed only with a saber. However, the absurdity of the situation lay in the fact that despite the overwhelming numerical and strategic disparity, it was the lone woman who commanded a fierce presence that suppressed the opposing side. For members of Night Raid like Hakam, who had crossed paths with Asdeath before, this was expected. But for the Revolutionary Army soldiers and the allied Tegu wielders, simply meeting Asdeath's gaze sent a shiver down their spines. Ice General. Asdeath, feeling that the numerous soldiers would dampen her enjoyment of the fight, employed her storm-like abilities. In an instant, 10,000 elite troops were obliterated. These so-called elite soldiers were no different from regular troops in the face of this monstrous force. Even more astonishingly, as the frozen corpses of the Revolutionary Army soldiers piled up, countless ice cavalry emerged from the snow, standing tall and unyielding. Asdeath, disdainful of wasting effort on minor opponents, showed interest only in Night Raid members like Hakam, who barely piqued her attention. Where is Wood? Without him, none of you are a match for me. With a single strike, she effortlessly deflected the combined attack from Bullet and Hakam. Her casual demeanor as she spoke made it clear she didn't consider them true threats. Whether we are your match isn't up to you to decide. Only a battle will reveal that. Leon, unwilling to tolerate Asdeath's condescension, roared defiantly. Assisted by Lubbock's crosstail, she propelled herself at lightning speed, aiming a fierce punch at Asdeath's face. With her incredible speed and the combined might of her Tegu-enhanced strength, Leon's attack generated a powerful shockwave. The punch seemed to transform into a roaring lion, ready to devour Asdeath. Boom! The tremendous impact shattered the ground, leaving a massive 10-meter-wide crater. Leon expected her blow to at least leave some mark on Asdeath, no matter how formidable the opponent. But as she took a closer look, she was stunned to find no trace of Asdeath in the crater. Sensing danger like a wild animal, Leon instinctively turned around, only to see a gleaming silver light flash before her eyes. Her body couldn't react in time. In the next moment, crimson blood splattered through the air, and an arm fell to the ground. Asdeath flicked the blood off her saber with a practiced motion, her face showing an expression of admiration. Your strength and reflexes are impressive, but your combat awareness is lacking. Still, your teamwork is excellent. No wonder my Jaggers have suffered repeated defeats at your hands. Asdeath's words, meant as a compliment, only felt like mockery to Leon. Had it not been for Lubbock's quick thinking, pulling Leon out of harm's way using the steel wires of crosstail, her head would likely have been severed. Asdeath's praise came from recognizing the seamless coordination among Night Raid members. Unlike her hastily assembled Jaggers, the Night Raid team had years of experience working together. They trusted one another implicitly and could rely on each other in battle. For most, losing an arm would count as a severe injury, potentially taking them out of the fight. But for Leon, with her Tegu beast transformation, King of Beasts, Lionel, such a wound wasn't even a minor setback. She calmly picked up her severed arm, and with Lubbock's wires stitching it back in place, combined with her Tegu's remarkable regenerative abilities, her arm was fully healed in no time. Watching Leon recover so swiftly, joined by the rest of the encircling Night Raid members, Asdeath showed no sign of anger. On the contrary, her face lit up with delight. Much like Wood, Asdeath was a battle maniac. Her true enjoyment came not from easily defeating opponents but from engaging in exhilarating battles. If her enemies were too weak, the fight would bore her. Now, however, things were getting interesting. If the battle ended too soon, where would the fun be? Meanwhile, on the other side, having recruited Kurum as a loyal subordinate and captured Wave, Wood decided it was time to reunite with Akam and the others. Following the trail of clues left by Leon, he headed toward a hidden village where her team was based. Don't worry about it. When Akam sees you, she'll probably jump into your arms. No one holds a grudge forever. Wood grinned mischievously as he spoke to Kiram, whose normally expressionless face betrayed some nervousness at the thought of seeing her sister, Akam. Besides, who hasn't done a few reckless things in their youth? If Akam wants to fight, I'll hold her legs, and you can grab her arms. We'll pin her down together. Kiram, who had initially been tense about the upcoming reunion, couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and disbelief at Wood's flippant remarks. Although Wood had displayed an aura of strength and confidence when persuading her to join, Kiram now realized his personality was far from serious. In fact, he was often just as carefree and ridiculous as Wave. Only later would Kiram fully grasp that Wood's seemingly dependable demeanor was mostly an act. While his strength was undeniable, his personality was anything but composed. It turned out that someone who could inspire Wave's admiration had to share a similar goofy streak. Pushing open the door of a dilapidated hut, Wood and the others found the place empty. Akam and her team were nowhere to be seen. Could they be out on a mission? Or perhaps we arrived too late, and this location has already been compromised? Chelsea speculated aloud, looking around the barren room. We are indeed late, Wood replied, scanning the scene. But it's not because the location was exposed. Akam and the others left on their own. Unlike Chelsea, who was newer to night trade and couldn't decipher the hidden messages left behind, Wood and mine, veterans of the team, quickly identified the concealed signs Akam's team had left behind. Following the hidden signs, Wood walked to a corner of the room. Under the surprised gazes of Kiram and the others, he plunged his hand into the ground and lifted a concealed compartment. Inside the compartment lay a long, blue sword and a folded letter. Even without touching it, Wood could feel the resonance of the weapon. It was his Digu, Night of Winter. As for the letter, it seemed like a jumble of unrelated sentences at first glance, but it could only be deciphered using the unique reading method known to night trade. The contents of the letter were simple. The Revolutionary Army's headquarters had come under attack by Asdith, so Akam and the others had left earlier to provide reinforcements. The Night of Winter had been recovered after defeating Dr. Stylish and was now returned to its rightful owner. Asdith is attacking the Revolutionary Army's headquarters? That's a huge problem. We need to head back immediately. Mine, who had been reading the letter alongside Wood, grasped the situation instantly and urgently called for them to return and assist. However, just as Mine moved to leave, Wood placed a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. He calmly spoke. Judging by the moisture level of this letter, Akam and the others must have left at least 2 days ago. Chelsea, you know the route to the Revolutionary Army's headquarters. How long would it take to get there? Chelsea nodded and replied. If we leave now, it would take at least 2 days to reach the headquarters. Previously, we managed a same-day trip because Boss used a flying danger beast. Of course, I'm talking about normal travel speeds. If it's someone like you, Wood, who isn't bound by human limits, you could probably make it there and back in a day. Hearing Chelsea's description of him as inhuman, Wood gave a wry smile. Even if I ran non-stop for a day, I'd still be exhausted. By the time I got there, I wouldn't have the energy to fight. How would I provide support then? So, what are you saying? That we just sit here and do nothing? Mine snapped, clearly frustrated by Wood's reluctance. Although she understood that his reasoning wasn't wrong, it was unbearable to think of their comrades facing danger while they stayed idle. Not necessarily, Wood replied with a sly grin. If Asdith can ambush the Revolutionary Army's headquarters and strike at our base, why can't we do the same to her? Mine and Chelsea froze, their expressions stunned. Realizing his implication, they both turned to Wood and asked incredulously. Wood, are you insane? If overthrowing the Empire were that easy, we wouldn't have spent so much effort fighting alongside the Revolutionary Army for so long. Wood's plan was clear. If Asdith could attack the Revolutionary Army's headquarters, then he intended to assault the Imperial capital itself. For Mine and Chelsea, such an idea seemed outrageous. The Imperial capital was heavily fortified, with countless Imperial soldiers stationed there. And even if they managed to reach the palace, they would still have to contend with formidable obstacles like General Bdo and the Temple of Fists. Not to mention the Emperor himself and his manipulative Prime Minister. Who do you think is the most dangerous person in the entire Empire? Wood asked with a smirk. After exchanging a glance, Mine and Chelsea responded without hesitation. Asdith, of course. And how do you think I compare to Asdith in terms of strength? Wood's tone remained casual, but his question made them pause. Mine and Chelsea didn't answer immediately. While Wood hadn't suffered any decisive defeats against Asdith, neither had they been present for his past encounters with her, making it difficult to assess. If you used a life-draining Tegu Heart of God, I believe you could surpass Asdith, even if just slightly. Kiram said, breaking the silence. Having witnessed their arena battle, Kiram knew that before Wood chose to retreat, Asdith had been on the defensive. If not for Wood prioritizing the safety of a group of children, he might never have been captured in the first place. Hearing Kurom's comment, Wood couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. Exactly. With Esdeath, the Empire's strongest, away from the capital, and knowing I'm capable of matching her strength, why shouldn't I take this opportunity to strike at the palace? In the past, I wouldn't have been confident enough. But now that Leon and the others have retrieved my Night of Winter, this plan is entirely feasible. The Empire can't concentrate all its forces in the capital. If we act swiftly enough and catch them off guard, it's not impossible. And like Esdeath, I can ignore minor opponents. No matter how many foot soldiers they have, they're meaningless to me. Mine and Chelsea fell silent, considering Wood's analysis. His reasoning, while bold, wasn't entirely implausible. Even so, the ongoing battle between Akom's group and Esdeath remained a cause for concern. Don't worry. Wood reassured them. Najunda isn't reckless. If things look bad, she'll prioritize the safety of night trade. As for the Revolutionary Army's higher-ups, they're beyond our control. Frankly, many of them aren't exactly clean. If some of them die, so be it. It might even help prevent corruption in the new regime after the Empire falls. In the end, Wood managed to convince mine and Chelsea to carry out a surprise attack on the Imperial capital. Wave, unlucky as always, was left behind at the dilapidated hut, while Kurom, Chelsea, disguised as Wave using Gaia Foundation, and Ron accompanied Wood as they boldly infiltrated the palace. There were many ways to launch a surprise attack, and directly charging in head-on was by far the least efficient and most foolish method. While Wood admitted to being a battle maniac, he wasn't reckless enough to emulate Esdeath's audacious frontal assaults. For him, a low-risk, stealthy infiltration was far more appealing than risking unnecessary losses or tipping off the enemy prematurely. Chapter 442, A Surprisingly Cooperative Wave? Previously, Kurom, Wave, and unknown personnel were involved in a battle, a fact that was no secret in the Imperial capital. However, by the time reinforcements arrived, they were greeted only by ruins and the corpses of Imperial soldiers eliminated by Wood and his team. As for the attackers and Kurom's group, they had all vanished. The Empire had no idea that Kurom and Wave had already been successfully turned against them. Esteemed sirs, may I ask what important matter brings you to the palace? Without an audience scheduled with His Majesty or the Prime Minister, I'm afraid we cannot permit entry. The palace guards, naturally recognizing Kurom and Wave, were respectful. The Jaggers had caused quite a stir in the Empire, and the guards knew the two were elite warriors under General Esdeath's command. Hence, they maintained a polite demeanor. In the entire Empire, only two individuals had the privilege of entering the palace unannounced, General Esdeath and General Doe. This fact alone underscored the extraordinary status of these two figures. As for the Prime Minister, his authority was even more unassailable. He wasn't someone who sought audiences, he decided who the Emperor would meet. Initially, Chelsea had considered disguising herself as Esdeath to facilitate smoother access to the palace. Unfortunately, with Esdeath currently engaged in a heated battle with the Revolutionary Army, her sudden appearance in the capital would immediately raise suspicions. Then inform the Prime Minister immediately that we've captured Wood, the strongest member of Night Trade. You know, the one General Esdeath has repeatedly tried to take down but couldn't. Since General Esdeath isn't in the capital right now, we've brought him here to await the Prime Minister's judgment. Hearing Wave's words and noticing the chains tightly binding Wood, the guards recognized him as the infamous criminal responsible for the recent chaos in the capital. Realizing this, the guards quickly ran into the palace to report. It didn't take long before the same guard returned, breathless, with news that the Prime Minister and the Emperor had agreed to see them. As a former member of the Empire's assassination squad, Kurom was entering the palace for the first time. It was also her first time seeing the legendary Prime Minister and Emperor in person. Kurom had always been considered an elite asset of the Empire, but in truth, she had been little more than a tool. A blade wielded without autonomy. She followed orders like a puppet, with no say in her own actions. However, upon seeing the Emperor for the first time, Kurom was stunned. The so-called Emperor wasn't much different from herself. Though seated on the throne, the young Emperor resembled nothing more than a marionette, with the strings held firmly in the hands of the corpulent Prime Minister, who tore into a piece of greasy meat with abandon. The Emperor didn't utter a word without first looking up at the Prime Minister for approval, his actions more akin to a well-trained pet than a sovereign ruler. That the millennia-old empire had fallen into corruption in just a few years was no surprise. With such a ruler at the helm, it was a miracle the nation hadn't collapsed sooner. So, you're the remaining members of Esdeath's Jaggers? How did you manage to capture this guy? From what I've heard, his strength is said to rival General Esdeath herself. The Prime Minister spoke while tearing at the greasy meat in his hand, his suspicious gaze fixed on the kneeling Kurom and the others. Though the Prime Minister's appearance was unimpressive, he was far from a fool. His cunning and ruthlessness were well known. He suspected treachery. If only one person had brought wood to the palace, he would never have allowed them entry. However, the appearance of Kurum, Run, and Wave together eased his concerns. The likelihood of all three Jaggers being turned against the Empire seemed slim. Moreover, the Prime Minister knew that Kurum was dependent on the Empire's drugs, making her betrayal highly unlikely. Prime Minister, you may not be aware, but this member of Night Raid, Wood, was previously captured by us and had his Tegu confiscated. A Tegu wielder without their weapon is significantly weakened. Furthermore, we anticipated his ambush, so the three of us joined forces to subdue him. As for our recent disappearance, it was because he attempted to escape, and we pursued him to prevent his getaway. Chelsea, disguised as Wave, explained the situation calmly and logically, leaving no room for suspicion. The Prime Minister gradually began to believe her story. If you captured a Night Raid member alive, why didn't you interrogate him yourselves? Why bring him to me instead? Though Chelsea's explanation was convincing, the Prime Minister's cautious nature prompted him to ask another question. With General Esdeath currently away from the capital, we didn't know how to handle him. Moreover, we'd heard that the Prime Minister was particularly interested in this individual. So, we decided to bring him here as a gesture of goodwill. We hope, Prime Minister, that you might look out for us in the future. Chelsea said, perfectly emulating a sycophantic tone and demeanor. From his position, Wood couldn't help but silently marvel at Chelsea's acting skills. She had flawlessly portrayed an opportunistic underling seeking favor, a performance so convincing it even impressed him. The Prime Minister, too, was thoroughly convinced. Over the years, he had encountered countless individuals trying to curry favor with him, and Wave's behavior was entirely in line with what he'd came to expect. Working under General Esdeath must be difficult. With someone so extraordinary, it's impossible for anyone around her to be more than a mere accessory. Still, you've done well this time. I'm sure His Majesty will reward you handsomely. The Prime Minister was genuinely intrigued by Wood. Among his private collection was a Tegu capable of controlling minds. Initially, he'd intended to use it on the Emperor, but the boy proved so easy to manipulate that the item had never been necessary. When he heard that a member of Night Raid had fought Esdeath to a standstill, the Prime Minister became deeply interested. Esdeath's power was immense, and though she had no ambitions of usurpation, her unchecked influence made the Prime Minister uneasy. Learning of Wood's existence, the Prime Minister had immediately considered using his mind-controlling Tegu to turn Wood into a counterbalance against Esdeath. However, when he asked Esdeath to hand Wood over, she flatly refused, leaving him both enraged and even more determined to carry out his plan. Before he could act, news arrived that the Jaggers had lost their prisoner, causing him to curse their incompetence while lamenting the missed opportunity. But to his surprise, after all the twists and turns, the prize target he had long sought had now been delivered right to his doorstep. Your Majesty, I believe the remaining members of the Jaggers have performed admirably. Even in General Esdeath's absence, they continued to fight valiantly and struck a heavy blow against the notorious Night Raid. I recommend they be rewarded for their efforts. Hearing the Prime Minister's suggestion, the young Emperor nodded blankly, then turned to him and asked slowly. What reward would you suggest, Prime Minister? The Prime Minister not only decided that rewards were necessary but also determined what they would be. Though Kurum and Run had heard about the Prime Minister's overwhelming control of the Empire, witnessing it firsthand was shocking. They hadn't realized the Empire had deteriorated to such an extent. This Emperor was no different from a puppet dangling at the end of the Prime Minister's strings. Since they are General Esdeath's subordinates and have shown such bravery, why not appoint them as Imperial Generals? Ah, I see. That makes perfect sense, Prime Minister. Then I shall. Just as the Emperor, under the guise of considering the Prime Minister's advice, was about to bestow titles upon Kurum and her team, Wave lowered his head and interrupted. My apologies for the interruption, Your Majesty, but I must humbly decline the honor. Instead of becoming an Imperial General, I would much prefer to serve as a humble attendant to the Prime Minister, ensuring his safety at all times. The young Emperor froze, then looked back at the Prime Minister for guidance. The latter stared at Wave with a curious, almost amused expression. The Prime Minister rarely concerned himself with minor figures like the members of the Jaggers. However, this Wave struck him as a particularly shrewd and greedy individual. First, he bypassed Esdeath to deliver Wood directly to the Prime Minister, clearly seeking personal glory. Now, he was rejecting the prestigious title of general in favor of becoming the Prime Minister's lackey. Any intelligent person would realize that the position of Imperial General was little more than a hollow title, granted or revoked at the Prime Minister's whim. In truth, it was far less advantageous than being a trusted dog at the Prime Minister's side. This young man, Wave, was clearly intelligent and sufficiently ambitious. The Prime Minister didn't dislike greedy people. He was one himself, and they were easier to control. In that case, Your Majesty, perhaps you could grant him to me. I've been in need of a bodyguard lately. The young emperor, naturally, saw no reason to refuse. He even generously allowed Wave to retain the rank of Imperial General while assigning him the additional duty of protecting the Prime Minister. As a bodyguard, Wave was expected to remain by the Prime Minister's side. After thanking them for the opportunity, Wave dutifully moved behind the Prime Minister. To General Doe, who was present in the audience chamber, Wave's behavior was utterly disgraceful. He had heard that Wave came from the Imperial Navy and was an exceptional soldier, but seeing him debase himself like this to curry favor with the Prime Minister was revolting. To Doe, it was a betrayal of the honor and dignity expected of an Imperial soldier. As the audience continued without suspicion, Wave, Chelsea in disguise, quietly moved behind the Prime Minister. Reaching into her cloak, she drew a dagger that gleamed with a chilling light. Clang! A sharp metallic sound echoed through the chamber. Chelsea's dagger had struck the Prime Minister's jeweled ring, which unexpectedly deflected the blade. Chelsea froze, her face full of shock. So, this is how you protect me? How touching. Though her initial attempt had failed, Chelsea wasn't about to give up. All the effort they'd put into their elaborate ruse was for this moment. To eliminate the Prime Minister with minimal risk. Retracting her dagger, Chelsea launched another swift strike, aiming for the Prime Minister's throat. While Chelsea's combat abilities weren't particularly strong compared to the likes of Knight Raid or Jaggers, she was still more than capable of handling ordinary targets. Her expertise in assassination made her especially dangerous. She knew exactly where to strike, targeting vital areas with precision. Yet, to everyone's surprise, the corpulent Prime Minister, whom they had pegged as nothing more than a gluttonous figurehead, was far more formidable than anticipated. The Prime Minister possessed significant combat skills, rivaling even Leon in raw strength. Unsurprisingly, Chelsea's second strike was also thwarted. Before her blade could reach his throat, the Prime Minister delivered a heavy blow to her abdomen, sending her flying like a kite with its string cut. Fortunately, Wood managed to catch her midair, preventing further injury. The sudden attack threw the entire chamber into chaos. 4 figures, 2 men and 2 women, each with distinct physiques, emerged from the shadows around the Prime Minister. They're the 4 Rakshasa demons. Elite fighters of the Temple of Fists. Run, having gathered intelligence on the Imperial capital's strongest factions, immediately recognized them. The Temple of Fists was a martial arts sanctuary in the capital, home to many skilled warriors. The 4 Rakshasa demons were the crème de la crème, unparalleled martial artists chosen from among thousands. Though they weren't Tigu users, they possessed abilities that allowed them to manipulate their bodies at will. Their physical prowess was so extraordinary that they could defeat Tigu users in hand-to-hand combat. These were individuals who had truly surpassed the limits of human strength. The 4 Rakshasa demons served as the Prime Minister's personal enforcers. With his teeth away from the capital, the Prime Minister had assigned them to guard him in secret. A precaution that now proved invaluable. Chapter 443, You're not the only ones beyond human limits. The 4 Rakshasa demons stepped forward to guard the Prime Minister, while General Doe moved immediately to shield the young Emperor. As the royal family's loyal protector, Doe's sole duty was ensuring the safety of the Emperor, no matter the circumstances. TCH, who would have thought that fat Prime Minister wasn't just a pushover? Judging by his combat skills just now, he's at least on par with Leon. Other than me and Kiram, anyone else trying to take him down solo would be throwing their lives away. Wood hadn't expected the Prime Minister to possess such formidable combat abilities. It was a development their team hadn't accounted for, despite all their planning. The original strategy was simple: eliminate the Prime Minister, the root of the chaos, and then deal with the Emperor and General Doe at their leisure. Now, things had taken a turn for the worse. In addition to General Doe, the 4 Rakshasa demons from the Temple of Fists had joined the fray. On paper, the fight seemed evenly matched at 5-on-5. But in practice, Wood's side was at a disadvantage. Mine could only provide long-range support and couldn't engage directly. Chelsea and Run, meanwhile, were of little help. Chelsea lacked combat skills entirely, and Run was only good at flying and running. Kiram, how many of the 4 Rakshasa demons can you handle? Wood asked, his tone calm but direct. Though the numbers were equal, Wood knew that he and Kiram would bear the brunt of the battle. Allocating their opponents strategically was crucial. How many I can handle? Kiram repeated, a wry smile tugging at her lips. The 4 Rakshasa demons were not Tigu users, but Kiram had heard their names during her time in the Empire's assassination unit. Each of them possessed strength comparable to the Elite 7 and had even fought alongside Akam in the past. Their strength was on par with members of Knight Raid and the Jaggers, and they far surpassed ordinary Tigu users. While Kiram was confident in her abilities, her March of the Dead, 8-roomed ego was no longer at full strength. After multiple battles with Night Raid, she was down to only 2 puppets, Natrala and Hunter. At best, Kurom estimated she was operating at 50% of her usual strength. She wanted to say she could handle one opponent, but doing so felt humiliating. At the same time, if she only took on one, would have to face 3 of the 4 Rakshasa demons plus General Bdo alone. I think I can barely handle 2. Kurom said hesitantly after a moment of thought. Even that felt like an overstatement. Against any one of the Rakshasa demons, Kurom knew her odds of victory were slim. Her Tigu didn't enhance her own physical abilities, and her swordsmanship, while proficient, paled compared to the Rakshasa demons, whose bodies exceeded human limits and boasted supernatural powers. Handling 2 of them would require everything she had, along with perfect support from Natrala and Hunter. Then the remaining 2 Rakshasa demons and General Bdo are mine. No holding back. We need to take them down as fast as possible. If that fat bastard escapes the palace, finding him again won't be easy. Hearing Wood's plan, Kurom sighed internally. She was already at her limit taking on 2 Rakshasa demons. Expecting her to defeat them quickly was asking the impossible. The 4 Rakshasa demons, Ibara, Suzuka, Sten, and Mez, were a formidable group. Ibara, a wiry man with an unnaturally flexible body. He could manipulate his limbs at will and derived sadistic pleasure from killing strong opponents he admired. The strongest of the group, Suzuka, a lean woman with the ability to manipulate her nails. Her masochistic tendencies left her body covered in scars, though her physical durability was exceptional. Sten, a hulking, bearded man with unmatched strength. Though slow, his 100-fold strike and near-indestructible body made him a fearsome force. Mez, a petite, tan-skinned girl with incredible speed. She used weighted horseshoe ornaments on her head to limit her speed, only removing them against worthy opponents. The battle began with chaotic intensity. Kurom engaged Sten and Ibara. Natrala and Hunter focused on Ibara in a 2-on-1 struggle, barely holding their ground against the strongest Rakshasa demon. Kurom's fight against Sten, however, was grim. Sten's brute strength and honed martial arts skills gave him a significant edge. As Akam's former mentor and Kazuki's old comrade, his abilities were a testament to years of training and experience. Sten's muscles were so well developed that Kurom's Tigu, room, couldn't even pierce his skin. When Sten unleashed his 100-fold strike, the resulting shockwave created a vacuum in the air, carving a massive trench in the ground. Meanwhile, Wood faced Suzuka and Mez. Suzuka's masochistic resilience and Mez's unparalleled speed made for a deadly combination. Mez removed her weighted ornaments, unleashing her true speed, which turned her into little more than a blur. Looks like I don't have the luxury of holding back, Wood muttered, his expression hardening as he prepared for the grueling fight ahead. Without the Empire's life-sustaining drugs to enhance her resilience, Kurom would have likely died from a direct hit by Sten. Thankfully, her agility allowed her to evade his attacks, though just barely. Sten's overdeveloped muscles slowed him down significantly, and with Mind's long-range support, Kurom managed to keep him at bay for the time being. On the other side of the battlefield, Wood was facing Mez and Suzuka. Unlike Kurom's struggle, his situation was the opposite. An overwhelming display of dominance. Initially, Wood had planned to pursue the fleeing Prime Minister, but Mez struck first. With incredible speed and coordination, the petite girl suddenly appeared above him and unleashed a powerful spinning kick aimed directly at his head. However, no matter how fast Mez was, Wood's heightened observation hockey predicted her movements. As her kick descended, Wood calmly raised one hand and caught her ankle midair. Not bad, girl. I'd give your kick a passing grade. As for your outfit, though, you get full marks. But let me give you some advice. Ever heard of the saying, the less clothing, the stronger the fighter? Do you know why your attack failed? It's because you're wearing too much on your lower half compared to your upper half. Mez wore a revealing top paired with loose pants. When Wood caught her ankle, he was clearly disappointed by the lack of a view. His tone filled with mockery. I'll smash your head in soon enough. Then you can stare all you want. Mez snarled, her fury evident. Despite her focus on martial arts, she was still a young girl and quickly caught on to Wood's insinuation. Furious, she lashed out with her other foot, aiming another kick at Wood's head. Unfortunately for her, with a sharp crack of displaced air, Wood raised his other arm and effortlessly blocked her second attack as well. As Wood prepared to taunt her again, his observation hockey suddenly detected an incoming threat from behind. Iron body, iron body. At the same moment, Suzuka, clad in an elegant dress and exuding a regal demeanor, appeared behind Wood. Using her ability to extend her nails into sharp, durable weapons, she attempted a sneak attack on him, aiming for his heart. However, clang. To Suzuka and Mez's astonishment, her reinforced nails, capable of piercing stone and metal, struck Wood's back and emitted a sound like steel on steel. Instead of flesh, it felt like her nails had struck forged iron. The resulting shock reverberated painfully through her hand. Realizing her attack had failed, Sasuke immediately leapt back to create distance, landing gracefully. Mez, taking advantage of the distraction, freed herself from Wood's grip and retreated to stand beside Sasuke, her eyes cautious and locked on their opponent. What's with this guy? Even if I hadn't used full power, that attack should have pierced him. Are you holding back? Mez asked, her suspicion clear. We know each other's abilities well. Sasuke replied. And I assure you, I didn't hold back. His body feels unnatural, like I was stabbing steel. A steel body? Could he be a cyborg? Mez wondered aloud. Cyborgs were not uncommon in the Empire, with figures like Dr. Stylish being renowned for their expertise in such modifications. Mez's speculation wasn't far-fetched. In response, Wood glanced at his torn shirt from Sasuke's attack. He tore off the remains, revealing a physique that was muscular yet perfectly balanced. Don't misunderstand. I'm no cyborg. I'm as human as they come. You Rakshasa demons are said to be martial artists whose bodies surpass human limits, right? Well, let me tell you something, surpassing human limits isn't your exclusive privilege. The iron body technique pushes the body to its absolute peak, hardening the skin and muscles to the point of being steel-like. It's not some shallow trick-like modification. Sasuke and Mez exchanged a glance, realizing that their opponent might be in the same league as Sten, a martial artist whose mastery rivaled their own. Before they could act further, Wood continued. Oh, and by the way, surpassing human limits isn't just about toughness. It's about speed too. For example, instant transmission. In an instant, Wood disappeared from their view, reappearing directly behind them at a speed that left only a blur. Simultaneously, he launched an attack while continuing his explanation, surpassing normal human movement speed. This is the technique of instant transmission. It's a fundamental step toward absolute mastery. Despite their sharp instincts as assassins, Sasuke and Mez couldn't react in time to Wood's sudden appearance behind them. Mez, being a speed-type fighter, managed to evade just barely. Sasuke, however, had no chance. Her only option was to extend her nails again and launch a desperate counterattack. Surpassing human attack speed. Speed is power. This is the technique of finger pistol, finger gun. Wood met Sasuke's flurry of nail strikes with nothing but a single finger. With incredible precision and rapid movements, he intercepted every one of her attacks. The air filled with the sharp clang of metal on metal as Wood's finger effortlessly deflected Sasuke's strikes. As Wood's speed increased, Sasuke found herself overwhelmed. In mere moments, her defenses broke, and she screamed as two finger-sized punctures appeared in her shoulder, sending her flying backward like a broken kite. Oddly, though, as Sasuke fell, Wood couldn't help but notice the expression on her face. Despite the blood and pain, there was a faint blush. An unsettling mix of pain and pleasure? Wood quickly shook off the thought and turned his attention to Mez. Using her incredible speed, Mez had escaped Wood's reach and was now darting between the palace's stone pillars, carefully watching for an opening. Still running, huh? Let's see if you can keep it up. Wood muttered, his eyes locking onto her. Chapter 444, What kind of monster are you? At this moment, Mez had removed the weighted horseshoe ornaments from her head. With her burdens lifted, her speed surged once again, and she was confident that even if Wood displayed the blistering speed he had shown earlier, she could keep up with him this time. Mez's unique ability, secreting and manipulating sweat, might seem unimpressive at first glance, but in hand-to-hand combat, it was incredibly effective. Her ability allowed her to slip past most attacks, even bypassing Lubbock's cross-tail barriers. Leaping between the Grand Hall's stone pillars, Mez mulled over how to handle Wood. To be honest, in all her time as part of the 4 Rakshasa demons, Wood was the most troublesome opponent she had encountered. Despite being a Tegu user, Wood hadn't even drawn his weapon, yet he had already overpowered her and Sasuke with sheer physical prowess. The 4 Rakshasa demons each had a unique trait that surpassed human limits. But the man before them seemed to have transcended human limitations in every conceivable way. Strength, speed, and frequency of attacks. Wood possessed the durability and power of Sten, the speed to rival Mez herself, and an attack frequency that completely suppressed Sasuke. Against such a foe, what hope did they have? As Mez pondered her options, Wood, standing on the ground below, flashed a toothy grin. You don't think staying up there makes you safe, do you, little girl? He teased. Let me show you a skill that transcends human speed. 6 powers moonwalk. Hearing this, Mez smirked mockingly. So what if I'm above you? What can you possibly do? Her confidence vanished instantly as she saw the unthinkable, Wood stepping into the air as if it were solid ground, moving effortlessly skyward. A human walking in the air? How is this even possible without a Tegu? Mez thought, her mind reeling. She relied on her agility, jumping between the pillars at incredible speed, but even her movements couldn't match Wood's ability to move freely in midair. Within seconds, he had closed the distance, and, returning the earlier favor, launched a powerful whip-like kick aimed directly at Mez. The same attack that Mez had used on him earlier was now coming her way, but while Wood had effortlessly absorbed her strike, she wasn't confident she could do the same. With no time to dodge, Mez crossed her arms over her chest defensively and activated her ability, secreting sweat to try and slip the kick away. However, the next moment, Mez's eyes widened in shock. As Wood's foot swung toward her, it suddenly turned black, coated in a metallic sheen. When the reinforced kick connected, Mez's ability proved completely ineffective. Worse still, she realized that this strike was far stronger than anything Wood had previously displayed. Boom. Despite her defensive posture, Mez's body was flung backward like a cannonball. She crashed through one of the hall's massive stone pillars, which took 2 people to fully encircle. Just before Mez hit the ground, Suzuka rushed from the rubble to catch her, preventing further injury. Even so, the impact wasn't easy to handle. The force carried Suzuka backward, her feet sliding across the floor for several meters. Her shoulder, already pierced by Wood's earlier finger pistol, began bleeding profusely again, splattering blood onto Mez's face. What kind of monster is this guy? My arms. I think both bones are completely broken. Mez muttered weakly. While she had avoided internal injuries, the sheer force of Wood's armament hockey-enhanced kick had fractured both of her arms completely. Wood glanced at the 2 women and sighed. You're both beautiful, but unfortunately, we have no shared bond, no history, and you're not even related to my companions. So, I'm afraid you'll have to die here. Allow me to show you another skill that transcends human limits. 6 Powers Tempest Kick. Among the 6 Powers techniques, Tempest Kick was Wood's strongest. As a master swordsman, even a slash created with his legs carried the precision to cleave through steel. Wood launched a flurry of crescent-shaped vacuum slashes toward Mez and Suzuka, each as sharp and deadly as a blade. Given their current state and the wide area covered by Wood's attack, avoiding or blocking the slashes was nearly impossible for the 2 women. You may have broken arms, but your legs are still fine, right? Suzuka said, setting Mez down. I'll hold him off for 5. No, 3 seconds. Use this chance to escape. Suzuka's tone wasn't sentimental. The 4 Rakshasa demons weren't known for camaraderie, as emotions like loyalty were considered luxuries in their line of work. Her decision was purely pragmatic. Mez was the youngest and least experienced among them, and Suzuka knew her own speed wasn't enough to escape Wood's pursuit. If someone had to survive, it made sense for it to be Mez. Besides, Suzuka's masochistic tendencies made her oddly welcoming of the punishment Wood could deal. The pain he had inflicted earlier hadn't deterred her, it had, if anything, excited her. You run. You've always taken care of me, and now it's my turn to repay the favor. Mez said, baring her small fangs in a grin. Her words carried a stubborn sense of honor, declaring that if anyone stayed behind, it would be her. Either she would shield Suzuka, or they would die together. Watching this heartfelt exchange between the 2 assassins, Wood felt a twinge of exasperation. Wait. Am I not supposed to be the good guy here? Why does this feel like I'm the villain? As Mez and Suzuka continued to argue over who would stay behind, Wood's Tempest Kick slashes reached them. Just as the deadly crescents were about to strike, a golden electrical net erupted from the ground, intercepting the attack with a crackling roar of thunder. I never had much respect for Honest or his ilk, nor did I care to fight alongside his lackeys. A deep voice said. But the resolve you 2 just displayed. That's something I can appreciate. I'll lend you my strength. For now. The voice belonged to none other than General Do. Do's ability to manipulate lightning and block Wood's full-powered Tempest Kick made his presence unmistakable. Wood had heard of Do from Najenda, whose accounts painted him as a rigid and upright soldier. When Do had remained silent earlier, watching Wood battle Mez and Suzuka, Wood had assumed the man had turned a blind eye to the Empire's corruption. But now, it was clear, Do's inaction wasn't due to apathy. It was disdain. For Prime Minister Honest and the 4 Rakshasa demons. Do had refused to align himself with such corruption, choosing only to act now, spurred by his own principles. I once thought General Do was a man of great wisdom and justice, but now, just as Najenda said, you're nothing more than an old stubborn fool. General Do, the supreme commander of the Empire's military. If you were to ask who the most popular general was, there was no doubt it would be Asdeath. However, if you were to ask who held the highest prestige among the soldiers, then it had to be General Do. General Do, in his 40s, had served under 2 emperors. In terms of seniority, even Najenda and Asdeath combined couldn't match him. Many of the Empire's current generals were once his students. General Do wasn't a villain, and he was known for his integrity. Without him, the few virtuous ministers left in the empire might have been entirely wiped out by honest. However, while righteous, General Do was also incredibly rigid. Following ancestral teachings that dictated military officers should not interfere in politics, he chose not to act against Honest's corruption despite being fully aware of it. This allowed Honest's influence to grow unchecked. It was said that General Do was another of the Empire's strongest individuals. Like his teeth, he wielded a Tegu capable of manipulating the elements. Unlike his teeth-size face Tegu, demon manifestation, demon's extract, General Do's Tegu was a lightning-based one, Wrath of the Thunder God, a Drumroll. Given that his opponent was rumored to rival Asdeath in strength, Wood saw no reason to hold back by refraining from using his own Tegu. Knowing that Do could command lightning, engaging in hand-to-hand combat would be sheer folly. Wood reached out and pulled the Night of Winter from where it had been planted in the ground. With a powerful stomp, he shattered the floor beneath him, propelling his body forward with explosive speed, leaving behind the sound of a sonic boom. The Tegu Wrath of the Thunder God, a Drumroll, was an armor-type Tegu. Its gauntlets enhanced striking power with built-in iron stakes, and it could summon powerful lightning for ranged attacks. General Do could manipulate lightning for high-pressure assaults, long-range blasts, and energy balls. He could even form a lightning armor around himself, which paralyzed anyone who came into contact with it. Watching the rapidly approaching Wood, General Do clenched his gauntleted fists. Amidst the crackling sound of lightning, golden orbs of electricity formed around him and shot toward his opponent. Hyaki Kokenryu, Adachi dance. With one hand gripping the Night of Winter, Wood unleashed a series of rapid strikes. The high-speed slashes created afterimages, sending an enhanced storm of wind blades crashing toward the incoming lightning spheres. As the sharp wind blades collided with the lightning orbs, a deafening cacophony of wind and thunder filled the grand hall. Chaotic arcs of electricity etched deep grooves into the floor, while fragments of wind blades scattered in every direction, leaving behind long gashes on the walls. Amidst the chaotic storm of wind and lightning, Wood's figure emerged unscathed, breaking through the electric storm and appearing directly in front of General Do. He raised his blade and swung it down in a decisive strike. Facing the descending blade, General Do remained unfazed, countering with a powerful punch. Lightning surged with a roar as his fist shot forward to meet the attack. Clang! The collision of the metal gauntlet and the blade created a shockwave, transforming into a violent gale that spread outward from the two combatants. Suzuka and Mez, who had been standing behind General Do and closest to the battlefield, were caught in the blast. Like kites with their strings cut, they were hurled through the air by the intense wind. The massive stone pillars in the grand hall, each requiring two people to encircle, began to crack like spider webs under the force of the shockwave. As golden lightning erupted once more from General Do, it coalesced into an armor-like shroud around him, forming a crackling suit of golden electricity. Metal and flesh alike conducted the powerful current. As Do's lightning surged, the golden arcs snaked along the Night of Winter, creeping toward Wood. The lightning armor generated by General Do was capable of paralyzing anyone who came into contact with it. An inherent weakness for any opponent specializing in close combat. However, to General Do's surprise, as the golden arcs reached Wood's body, his skin was suddenly covered in a black, metallic sheen. The moment the lightning touched this black surface, it was repelled. Boom! A powerful shockwave erupted as the two combatants were blasted apart by the force of their prolonged clash. The only difference was that General Do merely took a step or two back, while Wood skidded across the ground, leaving a long trail behind him. From this exchange, it was clear that in terms of raw strength, Wood was at a disadvantage compared to General Do. But that was no surprise. With Do's towering stature and the enhanced power granted by his lightning, the general's physical dominance was evident. Directly clashing with such brutal power and energy, Wood's loss in this aspect was expected. Chapter 445, Wood vs. General Do. Such astonishing strength, impressive martial skills, and you're still so young. Even within the entire empire, you're undoubtedly one of the strongest. If given a few more years to grow, you might even surpass General Asdeath. It's said you were once a soldier of the empire. With such a promising future, why would you choose this path, degrading yourself to become one of the rebels? General Do was a man who refrained from interfering in politics, but that didn't mean he was unaware of what transpired in the capital. He knew a fair amount about the members of Night Raid, and for individuals like Najenda, Bullet, and Wood, he felt a deep sense of regret. Najenda, Bullet, and Wood were all outstanding soldiers of the Empire, even generals who should have been expanding the Empire's borders. Yet, they had ended up on the opposite side, aiming to overthrow the very empire they once served. Up until now, Do had only heard of Wood's deeds. But now, face to face, he realized the young man before him far exceeded his expectations. For the longest time, Do had believed Esdeath to be the strongest warrior he'd ever encountered. But now, Wood stood before him, proving to be no less formidable. Someone who could have been the backbone of the Empire had been driven to this point by the likes of Honest and his ilk. It was precisely because of this realization that General Do's resentment toward Honest deepened. He resolved that once this storm passed, he would break his own principles and personally eliminate Honest and those corrupting the Empire. General Do, surely you're aware. Am I truly the one who has degraded himself? You, as the Empire's supreme commander, entrusted with the late Emperor's dying wishes, look at what you've allowed to happen. Honest is indeed a despicable man, but in my eyes, you, who are praised as upright and old-fashioned, are no better. Hearing Wood's words, the lightning surrounding General Do erupted like flames, crackling and exploding outward. You dare say I'm no better than that scoundrel Honest? That I'm also a culprit in the Empire's decline? General Do admired Wood, but that didn't mean he would tolerate such blatant insults. To be equated with Honest, whom he despised, was beyond his limits. Am I wrong? You possess the power to influence the Emperor, yet you chose to stand idly by. You may think you've used your authority to protect the Empire's few virtuous ministers, but do you even realize how many civilians and low-ranking officers have perished because of your inaction? Do clenched his fists at Wood's words, preparing to retort with his ancestral teachings about how generals should not interfere in politics. But before he could speak, Wood cut him off. Don't give me that nonsense about how generals shouldn't meddle in politics. The entire Empire is on the brink of collapse, and you still cling to ancestral teachings? As the leader of the Empire's military, isn't it your duty to protect the people? Yet, you've failed even in that. What kind of upright leader are you? Honest must die, the young Emperor must die, and no one will stop me. I decree it. Spirit descent. Night of winter. A bone-chilling cold erupted from Wood's body, spreading rapidly throughout the Grand Hall. As a massive, icy blue dragon enveloped Wood, frost-like white mist instantly coated every corner of the space. Honest deserves death. I'll admit that. But it must be by the Empire's law, not your hands. And I won't let you lay a single finger on His Majesty, nor will I allow the Empire to fall. That, too, is my duty as General Do. As Wood activated his Tegu, General Do also got serious. Violent golden lightning burst forth from his armored frame. The electric arcs shattered the floor beneath him, pierced the ceiling of the Grand Hall, and shot into the stormy clouds above. Meanwhile, Wood's side was engulfed in a massive blizzard. A towering tornado of icy wind froze everything around it, the icy winds tearing apart the hall's ceiling as well. The clash between the two was so intense that the once spacious hall where the Emperor held court began to tremble. The 20 or so stone pillars supporting the hall had already been partially destroyed during earlier battles. Now, with the collision of these two forces, over half of them shattered, leaving the remaining pillars barely holding on. It was only a matter of time before they, too, collapsed. The magnitude of the battle forced others to retreat. Even Kiram and the remaining 4 Rakshasa demons had to halt their fight and withdraw. Staying in the crumbling hall any longer would mean being buried alive, regardless of which side they were on. Wrath of the Thunder God. Hyaki Gokenryu. Snow Maiden. Unlike those retreating in panic, the two responsible for the hall's destruction, Wood and General Do, remained unnervingly calm. In the blink of an eye, the two vanished from their positions. Do's movements left trails of crackling lightning, while Wood's left a flurry of swirling snowflakes. The two reappeared dozens of meters from where they had stood, meeting in the center as they unleashed their attacks. Do's gauntlet surged with electric energy, summoning thunder from the heavens above. Lightning pooled around him like a sea of electricity before being compressed into his arm as he threw a devastating punch toward Wood. On Wood's side, his body was entirely encased in icy armor. As he swung his blade downward, the overwhelming cold froze everything in its path. The temperature difference was so extreme that Do thought he saw a spectral figure behind Wood. A white-clad, ethereal woman wielding a long blade. Boom. Violent lightning clashed with bone-chilling ice, creating a massive shockwave. The initial collision created a vacuum at the center before the force exploded outward in a ring. The remaining stone pillars, already riddled with cracks, crumbled instantly. With the collapse of these final supports, the Grand Hall could no longer stand, and it came crashing down in a massive cloud of dust and debris. Compared to Do's lightning-based Tegu, a Drumroll, Wood's Night of Winter might not be as destructive in raw energy output. However, the intense cold and sharpness of Wood's abilities posed a significant challenge even to someone as powerful as General Do. The ability to manipulate ice was merely a supplementary feature of Night of Winter. Its primary strength lay in augmenting the user's body with its full body armor. However, the ice-based swordsmanship Snow Maiden from Wood's Hyaki Gokenryu was significantly amplified by Night of Winter. The combination of the two unleashed extraordinary power. Under the devastating impact of their clash, the vast palace was reduced to rubble. Neither the four Rakshasa demons nor Kurom knew which of the two combatants had emerged victorious. What was clear, though, was that after such a catastrophic collision, even the victor would not come out unscathed. If they didn't escape quickly, the sheer weight of the palace debris could suffocate them to death. Yet, just as Kurom and Chelsea anxiously prepared to dig through the rubble in search of wood, two powerful updrafts suddenly erupted from the ruins. Moments later, a figure shrouded in crackling lightning and another clad in icy blue armor shot up from two opposite corners of the debris. Without hesitation, they charged at each other once again. Are those two even human? After a collision strong enough to collapse the entire palace, they're still completely fine. Even the four Rakshasa demons, who had long surpassed human limitations, couldn't hide their shock at the sight of Wood and General Bdo resuming their fight. It wasn't surprising that the two survived such an intense battle, but the fact that neither of them showed any signs of injury was downright unbelievable. Wood's Knight of Winter was an armor-typed Tegu, further reinforced by armament hockey. This combination rendered the collapsing palace debris harmless. Similarly, General Bdo's Tegu, a Drimlich, was also an armor type. The lightning that constantly emanated from him shattered any rubble before it could make contact, ensuring he, too, was unharmed. The clash between Wood and General Bdo continued across the palace ruins at an unimaginable speed. Even the speed-focused Rakshasa demon, Mihat, who prided herself on her swiftness, found herself awestruck. For someone like Chelsea, who lacked combat strength, the battle was even more incomprehensible. All she could see were a blue streak of light and a golden flash of lightning colliding repeatedly, causing massive destruction with each impact. Unable to discern who held the upper hand, Chelsea turned to Kurom for clarification. Their level is far beyond mine, so I can't see much either. But I think Wood has the edge. Don't forget, Wood still has another Tegu he hasn't used yet. If he activates it, General Bdo will likely be defeated instantly. Kurom and Chelsea both knew that while Wood and Bdo appeared evenly matched, Wood had yet to unleash his full power. If he were to use the Tegu Heart of God, the current deadlock would be shattered in an instant, and General Bdo wouldn't stand a chance. However, they also understood the severe side effects of Heart of God. Wood had mentioned before that after rescuing Kurom, using it one or two more times might completely drain his life force. Although he had spoken these words with a nonchalant grin, Chelsea and Mine had sensed the gravity behind them. Amidst the high-speed clash with General Bdo, Wood wrestled with his thoughts. Truthfully, despite both being hailed as the Empire's strongest, Wood felt that Bdo's strength was noticeably inferior to Asdeath's. Leaving aside the strength of their respective Tegu, Bdo's age meant his physical condition was far from its peak, unlike the youthful Asdeath. In terms of battle experience and skill, Bdo, as the Empire's supreme commander with years of military service, was nearly on par with Asdeath. However, in terms of instinct and overall danger, Asdeath was far more formidable. Fighting Asdeath felt like facing a wild beast. Relentless and unyielding, with combat instincts and reflexes honed to inhuman levels. Against such a deadly opponent, even a seasoned swordsman like Wood had to tread carefully, constantly wary of a lethal counterattack. In contrast, Bdo's approach was that of a seasoned general. His techniques were impeccable, but his steady and methodical style lacked the unpredictability that made Asdeath so terrifying. Even without Heart of God, Wood was confident he could eventually defeat General Bdo if the fight continued. The problem was time. By the time Wood secured his victory, Honest and the young Emperor would have long escaped. Yet activating Heart of God posed its own risks. Doing so might drain the last of his life force, effectively ending this chapter of his journey. It seems I'll have to take a page out of Asdeath's book and adopt her combat style. Otherwise, I won't be able to break this stalemate. As Wood and General Bdo collided again, Bdo swung a lightning-imbued fist toward Wood's face, while Wood gripped his blade with both hands, aiming for Bdo's chest. Normally, both combatants would adjust their attacks or evade upon sensing danger. But this time, Bdo was stunned. Wood showed no intention of dodging his thunderous punch. Instead, he resolutely swung his blade downward, fully committed to his attack. Realizing it was too late to adjust his stance, Bdo's expression hardened. If retreating meant taking a direct hit, he might as well strike back with full force. With a fierce determination, he unleashed his lightning-charged punch directly at Wood's face. Boom! Boom! Two deafening explosions echoed across the ruins. Both Wood and General Bdo, having taken each other's attacks head-on, were sent flying, crashing into the debris below. Chapter 446, The Strongest Imperial Arm. Imperial Guardian, Shikao Taser. Soon, both figures rose again from the rubble. Grand General Bdo's armor bore a deep gash across the chest, faint traces of blood seeping through. On Wood's side, his face was obscured by the armored helmet, but the golden arcs of electricity still flickering on his faceplate made it clear. He had taken a heavy punch, and it hadn't been gentle. "Seems like you've decided to change your strategy," Do remarked, his voice calm yet stern. "You're abandoning endurance for an exchange of blows to end this fight quickly." As a battle-hardened veteran, Do immediately understood Wood's intention. Still, he had no choice in the matter. Wood's strength wasn't inferior. If anything, it was slightly greater. If Wood chose such a reckless style, Do could only face him head-on. "Changing strategy?" Wood replied, a smirk evident in his tone. "This was always my style. Back then, I had magic reserves to spare and a healing array inscribed on my body. Fighting like this wasn't reckless. It was strategic. Now, things are different. But let's see whose body lasts longer." Without hesitation, the two surged forward again, clashing with a force that shook the earth. This was no longer a duel of precision or tactics, it was a contest of brute strength and endurance. Wood's blade tore into Do's armor, while Do's electrified fists struck the reinforced plates of Wood's armor. The exchange was relentless. Neither man holding back, both driven by the weight of their respective convictions. Wood's Frost Knight armor, though bolstered by hockey, bore visible dents from Do's devastating strikes. Meanwhile, Do's Adrimlich, though formidable, was riddled with cracks and gouges, its once pristine form now reduced to a battered shell. With every exchange, the rubble of the palace was reduced further. From massive boulders to mere dust. Even Chelsea, who wasn't a combatant, could see it. Wood was gaining the upper hand. The tide was shifting in his favor, and the gap between them was only growing. Do was formidable, but age was his greatest weakness. In contrast, Wood, though battered, had his armor, his hockey, and a level of resilience that gave him a clear advantage. Finally, with a decisive slash, Wood sent Do flying, the blade carving deep into his opponent. Do collapsed in a pool of blood, his wounds too severe to recover from. The once mighty thunder god's wrath, Adrimlich lay shattered, beyond repair. Breathing heavily, Wood gazed at his fallen foe. "Your resolve to protect the Empire," he said, his voice cold, "wasn't as strong as my determination to destroy it. You were a great general, but a terrible steward. As a loyal guard dog, you've served admirably. But as a leader tasked with safeguarding this empire, you failed." Leaving those words behind, Wood turned and sprinted in the direction Honest and the Emperor had fled. The remaining Rakshasa demons, Ibara and Stan, moved to intercept him, but Chelsea and Mine blocked their way. Suzuka and Mez hesitated, but when Wood turned his icy glare toward them, they froze. "I have no time to waste," Wood said coldly. "If you wish to stop me, try. But don't expect a second Do to save your lives. My mercy is finite." Paralyzed by fear, Suzuka and Mez didn't dare move. Their instincts screamed at them to run, yet their bodies refused to obey. In that moment, they felt death itself looming over them. Wood's gaze alone conveyed an unmistakable truth: any move against him would be their last. Wood left the palace ruins at full speed, his mind racing. He worried Honest might have already escaped. The corpulent minister had proven surprisingly capable in combat. Though Wood had ended the battle with Do as swiftly as possible, valuable time had been lost. Enough time for Honest to slip into the city, vanishing into the chaos. Yet, to Wood's surprise, the trail didn't lead outside the palace. Instead, Honest and the Emperor had retreated deeper into its core. When Wood finally caught up, Honest stood before the Emperor, his voice low and conspiratorial. The young boy clutched his scepter, stepping toward a grand, ornate throne. "Rebel," Honest said, his voice laced with mockery. "Do you know where you stand? This is the heart of the palace, the sanctum of the imperial bloodline. Here lies a weapon of unmatched power, crafted for the Emperor's blood alone. Behold. Imperial Guardian, Shikao Taser." Honest's face twisted into a grotesque smile as he continued. "Shikao Taser. The first and greatest imperial arm. It is the origin and pinnacle of their creation, a weapon said to grant the power of gods to its wielder. And only one of royal blood can awaken it." The Emperor stepped forward, placing his scepter into the throne's keyhole. The chamber rumbled, ancient mechanisms springing to life. "You think I'd flee?" Honest sneered, turning to face Wood. "Why would I abandon the empire I've built? This empire will not fall. Soon, you will face the power of a god." Chapter 446, The Strongest Imperial Arm. Shikao Taser. Wood was indeed incredibly strong, but their victory wasn't guaranteed. After all, once the strongest imperial arm, Shikao Taser, was activated, the tides could easily turn. Boom. 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 With the ground trembling violently, a pair of crimson lights began to flicker in the darkness. As the massive Shikao Taser slowly rose, shaking the very foundation of the palace, Honest burst into wild, unrestrained laughter. Honest could have easily claimed the empire and crowned himself emperor. Yet, he hadn't done so. Instead, he chose to keep the young emperor alive and even ensured to take him along during their escape. The key reason for this decision was that the young emperor alone could wield Shikao Taser, the strongest imperial arm. The form of Shikao Taser bore a slight resemblance to the armored-type imperial arms wielded by Wood, Dotsumi, and Wave. However, its size was exponentially more outrageous. While standard armored-type imperial arms typically capped at around 2 meters tall, Shikao Taser stood at a staggering height of nearly 100 meters. When it rose to its full height, it effortlessly burst through the palace ceiling. No, it would be more accurate to say that when Shikao Taser stood, the entirety of the palace, and even the imperial capital itself, looked like nothing more than a miniature model by comparison. As soon as Shikao Taser activated, its mouth began to open, rapidly gathering an immense concentration of energy. Whoosh! In just a matter of breaths, an enormous red beam shot out of Shikao Taser's mouth, hurtling toward Wood at breakneck speed. The beam, unleashed from its colossal form, had a terrifying width of several meters. Its speed outclassed even the lightning attacks from General Do's imperial arm. As the massive crimson energy beam bore down on him, Wood's observation hockey sounded an alarm. Uncertain of Shikao Taser's full power, he chose not to confront it directly. With swift decision-making, Wood utilized his high-speed instant transmission technique, narrowly dodging the devastating laser. Boom! The red beam missed its mark, streaking past Wood. Moments later, a massive explosion erupted behind him, forming a colossal sphere of energy. A gigantic mushroom cloud ascended over the imperial capital as the shockwave rushed toward Wood from behind. The sheer force nearly sent him tumbling. When Wood turned to look, he was utterly stunned. Where he had been standing moments before, a deep trench several fathoms wide stretched from the palace all the way through the capital's streets for kilometers. The surface of the trench had been completely scorched into barren ash. Everything in the beam's path had been obliterated without resistance. At the end of the trench, where the crimson laser had finally detonated, was an enormous crater nearly 10 kilometers in diameter. In the center of this crater, there was no sign of buildings, nor even a hint of the ground itself. It was as though someone had taken a massive scoop and carved a hole straight out of the imperial capital's map. Damn. This is insane. I could accept if this was some kind of futuristic giant mech. But this thing has nuclear-level firepower. That's just straight-up cheating. Faced with the catastrophic destruction caused by Shikao Taser's casual laser attack, even Wood couldn't help but curse out loud. The power of Shikao Taser was simply too overwhelming. One laser was enough to instantly wipe out an army of 100,000. Against such a monstrosity, even the strongest armored imperial arms would be nothing more than scraps of metal. No defense, no matter how strong, could withstand a direct hit from such an attack. Wood admitted that even with his winter night armor coated in armament hockey, he would have struggled to survive that kind of assault. And to think, this terrifying machine was an invention from 1,000 years ago. If this wasn't cheating, what was? The young emperor, clearly operating Shikao Taser for the first time, hadn't yet mastered its full range of functions. After the initial laser missed its mark, a series of barrels began to emerge from Shikao Taser's shoulders. Sensing something amiss, Wood's instincts flared just as countless smaller red lasers began to fire from these shoulder cannons. Although the lasers from its shoulders were neither as powerful nor as wide as the mouth laser, they made up for it with sheer numbers and a homing capability. This thing is way too OP. It has nukes for long-range destruction, and now it's throwing in homing and area of effect attacks? This is ridiculous. Wood relied on moonwalk to leap into the air, continuously dodging the death beams. With his agile movements and sharp reflexes, he avoided the barrage. Meanwhile, the entire palace was reduced to rubble under the sweeping lasers, the once grand capital now sliced apart like a cake. 100 ghost sword style, Adachi dance. Being on the defensive wasn't Wood's style. While dodging Shikao Taser's relentless assault, he found openings to launch counterattacks. Swinging his blade, he unleashed a storm of wind blades toward the colossal machine. Chapter 447, The Winter Knight's Secret Techniques. Shikao Taser was massive, a towering mechanical monstrosity armed with devastating weapons. However, its immense size also came with a glaring weakness. Its enormous frame made it an easy target for any attack, nearly impossible to miss. Wood unleashed a flurry of flying sword slashes. The wind blades howled as they surged forward, growing in size as they traveled. These sharp, slicing winds were powerful enough to cleave through solid rock effortlessly. But when the slashes struck Shikao Taser, Wood was astonished. His attacks hit their mark as expected, yet the damage inflicted was far below his expectations. As the creator of the technique, Wood carefully observed the interaction. The wind blade seemed to collide with an invisible barrier surrounding Shikao Taser before reaching its main body. The result? The power of his attacks was diminished by roughly 70% before they even touched Shikao Taser. By the time they connected with its towering frame, the damage they caused amounted to nothing more than superficial scratches. Not only does it wield such devastating offensive power, but its defensive capabilities are at this level too. From his observations, Wood deduced that Shikaotaser either possessed an unknown energy shield or was constructed from a material capable of absorbing massive amounts of impact force. Regardless of the explanation, Shikaotaser stood like an impenetrable fortress, combining unparalleled destructive capabilities with near-impenetrable defenses. Hyaki Yagyo Sword Style, Joragamo. Hyaki Yagyo Sword Style, Ushiana. Hyaki Yagyo Sword Style, Yukiana. Using moonwalk and instant transmission to dart swiftly through the air, Wood wielded his sword, Winter Knight, with such speed and precision that it became a blur in his hands. He unleashed a series of advanced techniques from his Hyaki Yagyo sword style, combining slashes, strikes, and thrusts. Yet, no matter how relentless his assault, whether it was multi-directional slashes, powerful cleaves, or piercing thrusts, the damage dealt to Shikaotaser was reduced by the same 70%, leaving only minor scratches on its immense frame. Among his techniques, the Yukiana slash, enhanced by the frost abilities of Winter Knight, was the most potent. It managed to momentarily freeze parts of Shikaotaser's exterior. However, as soon as the machine fired its laser weaponry, the immense heat generated melted the ice in an instant. As the battle dragged on, Wood began to feel the increasing difficulty of evading Shikaotaser's laser attacks. This wasn't due to a decline in Wood's physical state but because the young emperor was becoming more proficient at controlling Shikaotaser. The once pristine imperial palace had already been reduced to rubble under the onslaught of Shikaotaser's lasers and Wood's sword techniques. When Kirim, wielding Yatsufusa, arrived after converting General Do into one of her undead puppets and assisting Mine in defeating the remaining 4 Rakshasa demons, they were stunned at the sight of the gargantuan Shikaotaser. Stories of the Empire's legendary 48 imperial arms, including a rumored supreme imperial arm, had been whispered for years. But the sight of Shikaotaser far exceeded their imaginations. Mine and Chelsea couldn't help but wonder, if the Empire had such a powerful weapon, why hadn't it used it earlier to crush the revolutionary army? With its fortress-like scale and devastating weaponry, Shikaotaser could annihilate an entire army single-handedly. You all deal with Honest. Don't let that bastard escape. I'll handle this thing. When Wood saw Kirim, Mine, and the others arrive, he knew they wouldn't be able to contribute much against Shikaotaser. To put it bluntly, even though Kirim and Mine were Imperial arms users, their weapons were leagues below Shikaotaser in terms of destructive power. Even with Winter Knight, Wood's most potent frost-enhanced slash, Yukiana, could only inflict minor damage. Mine, even if she poured her entire spirit energy into firing her strongest shot from Pumpkin, would barely scratch Shikaotaser. And as for Kirim's Yatsufusa, it was primarily a support-type weapon with no significant offensive capability against such a colossus. By now, the capital had descended into utter chaos. The once iconic palace had become the epicenter of destruction, its continuous explosions and lasers disrupting life in the Empire's heart. In the past, even the fearsome Night Raid operated under the cover of darkness, never daring to attack high-profile targets in broad daylight. But this time, the chaos unfolded in the middle of the day, in the heavily guarded palace at the center of the Empire. As curious citizens turned their eyes toward the palace, they were greeted by a terrifying sight. A crimson laser beam erupted from Shikaotaser, obliterating multiple streets and reducing an entire residential area to ashes in an instant. Under the onslaught of that laser, anything caught in its path, buildings, vegetation, animals, and humans, was vaporized without even a chance to scream. This scene of sheer annihilation plunged the entire capital into a state of panic. Whether noble or commoner, everyone fled the city in terror. The overwhelming power of Shikaotaser, capable of erasing thousands of lives in an instant, left no one feeling safe. The young emperor, intoxicated by the power of Shikaotaser, had completely lost himself. Though he once idolized his wise father and dreamed of ruling the empire justly, his youth and inexperience left him vulnerable. His rise to power had been orchestrated by Honest, who ensured his pliability as a puppet ruler. In the young emperor's eyes, Honest was the most trustworthy figure. Honest not only helped him ascend the throne but also disciplined those disobedient nobles who dared to challenge his authority. As a child, the young emperor always yearned to rely on his own strength rather than depend on Honest. However, his capabilities were simply too weak to achieve anything noteworthy. But now, things were different. Shikaotaser, the supreme throne, was an imperial arm that only the royal bloodline of the founding emperor could wield. At this moment, he controlled this unparalleled weapon, using its might to punish the rebels who dared to disrespect the empire. For the first time, the young emperor felt the intoxicating sensation of wielding overwhelming power. Only he could command such might, which began to alter his mindset. All he could think about now was eliminating Wood, the rebel. Achieving this victory would finally give him a noteworthy accomplishment to his name. A crimson laser shot toward Wood again. While Wood initially dodged, he spotted a fleeing mother and daughter in the laser's path. Gritting his teeth, he turned back. Boom. Even with the reinforcement of armament hockey, Wood, who intercepted the small-scale laser with his longsword, was flung back by the immense force. He crashed through several buildings before being buried in a pile of rubble. Damn it. If I recklessly use the heart of God, who knows if my remaining life force will be enough to finish this fight. But if I continue fighting like this, defeating this supreme Imperial arm seems nearly impossible. And if this drags on? Faced with the enormous and heavily fortified Shikout taser, Wood found himself short on options. His initial strategy was to turn the battle into a war of attrition, knowing Kiram and the others were already handling honest. Given Shikout taser's colossal size and seemingly perfect offensive and defensive mechanisms, it had to consume an enormous amount of energy. Though the Emperor controlled it, he was just a child and couldn't provide Shikout taser with the energy it needed. This meant the weapon had its own power system. Wood believed that such immense power must come with immense energy consumption. He was convinced Shikout taser couldn't maintain its current level of high-intensity combat indefinitely without exhausting its power source. However, reality rarely aligns with expectations. The young Emperor, now drunk on power, had begun indiscriminately launching attacks to eliminate Wood, even at the cost of widespread destruction. The imperial capital, as the most prosperous city in the empire, was home to countless citizens. Under Shikout taser's onslaught, many innocents were inevitably caught in the crossfire. Wood didn't consider himself a good person, but he couldn't stand by and let innocents die because of him. If the heart of God won't work, then there's only one other way to increase my strength. A deafening roar erupted from the rubble, echoing across the empire. It was followed by a powerful gust of wind that shot skyward, scattering debris in all directions. An icy chill swept through the air, and a thick layer of frost began to spread rapidly across the ground, encasing everything in sight. The temperature plummeted at an alarming rate. Despite it being the height of summer, dark clouds gathered in the sky, and snow began to fall eerily. Seeing Wood rise from the rubble, unscathed and now causing such a dramatic display, the young Emperor was incensed. He immediately directed Shikout taser to unleash an enhanced version of its laser from its mouth. A massive crimson beam tore through the sky, carving a scorched trench through the streets and hurtling toward Wood at incredible speed. This time, however, Wood didn't attempt to evade. Before the crimson beam could reach him, it was intercepted by a colossal ice dragon that appeared from behind him. Previously, when Wood wielded the Winter Knight, the phantom of the ice dragon Skaza would appear, but only partially. This time, however, the blue ice dragon roared as it completely broke free from its chains, revealing a body as massive as Shikout taser's, with a terrifyingly menacing appearance. Shikout taser's powerful laser was halted before it could touch Wood, blocked by the ice dragon's enormous wings. With a single powerful sweep, the crimson beam shattered into fragments, scattering like stardust across the sky. The giant dragon, which had emerged behind Wood and shielded him, was not a real living creature but a manifestation of his aura combined with the power of the Winter Knight. As mentioned before, Wood's Imperial arm, the Winter Knight, was a new generation weapon modeled after Tatsumi's Incursio and Wave's Grand Chariot. As a cutting-edge armor-type Imperial arm, the Winter Knight combined the best features of both its predecessors. It boasted the superior functionality of the Grand Chariot while retaining the special abilities and evolutionary potential of Incursio. What Wood now unleashed was the secret technique of the Winter Knight: Dragon Transformation. Like Incursio, which was made from the super dangerous beast Tyrant, the Winter Knight used the dragon-type super dangerous beast Skaza as its material. Both Incursio and the Winter Knight paid a heavy price for using their secret techniques. Their users' bodies would be eroded by the essence of the dragon-type dangerous beast. The stronger the power obtained, the greater the price paid. For armor-type Imperial arms like Incursio and the Winter Knight, the cost of using their secret techniques was having their bodies corrupted by dragon-like traits, turning them into inhuman monsters or, in extreme cases, leading to death. However, upon paying this price, the armor-type Imperial arms underwent evolution. This evolution was filled with infinite possibilities, granting their users power rivaling anything imaginable in a short period. While the Heart of God consumed life force, the secret technique of the Winter Knight only required enduring bodily corruption. Faced with the two choices, Wood chose the latter without hesitation. Chapter 448, Wood's all-or-nothing gamble. Wood was acutely aware that his remaining life force might not be sufficient to sustain the activation of the Heart of God until the end of the battle. Even he had no confidence in surviving this fight if he relied solely on it. However, he was more than capable of enduring the side effects of the Winter Knight's secret technique. The consequence? His body would be eroded, transforming him into a half-human, half-dragon monstrosity. But what did that matter? This was the final battle, and Wood had already resolved to stake his life on it. As Skaza shattered the crimson laser unleashed by Shikow Taser, the snowflakes falling from the sky grew heavier until they formed a massive blizzard. The dragon-type super-dangerous beast Skaza, after obliterating Shikow Taser's laser, let out an earth-shaking roar before transforming into an enormous icy gale. It soared into the sky and merged with the thick clouds overhead. Soon, the thick clouds were pierced by a ray of dawnlight, like a sword slicing through the sky. A figure slowly descended from the opening in the clouds. Wood's appearance had undergone a dramatic transformation. Previously, when the winter night was activated, his body was clad in armor, and his height reached just under 2 meters. Now, however, his armor had become significantly thicker, and his body had swelled to over twice its original size, standing nearly 4 meters tall. In addition to the changes in size, his armor now featured a pair of dragon wings with a wingspan of nearly 10 meters, as well as a long, sinuous dragon tail extending several meters behind him. The gauntlets that once resembled human hands had morphed entirely into dragon claws. While the armor retained its blue hue, it now bore a metallic dragon scale texture, giving it an even more ferocious and intimidating appearance. As Wood's clawed feet touched the ground, the icy aura emanating from his armor instantly froze the surface beneath him, causing a wave of frost to spread outward. And this was without Wood employing any special abilities. Simply the passive chill radiating from his transformed armor was enough to alter the surrounding environment. In this state, Wood no longer resembled a human. He appeared to be a dragon incarnate. The young emperor, seated in Shikow Taser's cockpit, was momentarily stunned by Wood's sudden transformation. However, he quickly regained his composure. No matter how much Wood changed or what powers he unleashed, the emperor's faith in the ancestral might of Shikow Taser remained unshaken. Rebellious fool. No matter how much you struggle, you will be judged by me today. No imperial arm can defeat Shikow Taser. The young emperor couldn't understand why so many people opposed him. He had tried so hard to be a good ruler, yet the nobles, the revolutionary army, and even Wood all stood against him. Why did everyone betray him? With a roar of frustration, the emperor unleashed dozens of crimson lasers, all hurtling toward Wood at incredible speed. By this point, the emperor had grown more adept at operating Shikow Taser, and the trajectory of these lasers was calculated with precision. No matter how fast or agile Wood was, this barrage of lasers would inevitably cause him some injury. Seeing the lasers converging from various angles, Wood clenched his dragon-clawed fist, feeling the immense power coursing through his transformed body. A confident smile spread across his face beneath the armor. Wood raised his fist and slammed it into the ground with tremendous force. The impact caused the ground to quake, and an icy chill surged outward. Massive ice pillars erupted from the earth, extending forward to intercept the oncoming lasers. The crimson beams collided with the ice pillars, shattering them into countless shards. Yet, as the lasers dissipated, their energy spent, the barrage failed to reach Wood. When the young emperor attempted to lock onto Wood's position amidst the flurry of ice fragments, he found that Wood had completely vanished from sight. Hyaki Yagio sword style, Atachi. A chilling voice echoed from behind Shikow Taser, and the emperor, startled, frantically tried to turn the massive machine around. But before he could react, a powerful tremor shook Shikow Taser's colossal frame. Clad in his dragon armor and now standing nearly 4 meters tall, Wood wielded a long, tail-like sword fashioned from his dragon tail. With this enormous blade, he unleashed a fierce slash imbued with icy winds. The crescent-shaped slash struck Shikow Taser with tremendous force. Despite its ability to absorb 70% of incoming impact, the strike still left a massive gash nearly 10 meters long, stretching from its shoulder to its chest. The deep gash, several meters in depth, caused sparks and electrical discharges to erupt from Shikow Taser's damaged frame. Momentarily panicked by the unexpected blow, the young emperor quickly regrouped and initiated a counterattack. Though Shikow Taser resembled an immobile fortress, it was equipped with a vast arsenal of weaponry. Its limited mobility didn't render it powerless, as its limbs were fully functional and capable of retaliation. The shoulder damage was severe enough to be considered a critical hit for most Imperial arms, but Shikow Taser's massive size ensured that it remained combat-capable despite the injury. A palm the size of a building descended from the sky. While it didn't completely block out the sun, it cast a massive shadow that entirely engulfed Wood's nearly 4-meter-tall form. Seeing the massive hand hurtling toward him, Wood initially planned to dodge. However, as if anticipating his move, the young emperor, who had gradually mastered the operation of Shikow Taser, unleashed steel cables from the machine's abdomen, binding Wood's limbs. In his current state, even cables as thick as an adult's thigh were no match for Wood's sheer strength. With a violent pull, he snapped the bindings. Yet, the delay was all the emperor needed. The moment Wood broke free, Taser's colossal palm came crashing down on him. With no time to escape, Wood had no choice but to brace himself and face the attack head-on. As Taser's hand descended, Wood thrust both arms upward to meet it. At first, the young emperor was certain of his victory. The size difference between Taser and the Winter Knight was incomparable. One was a towering behemoth over 100 meters tall, while the other, even in its enhanced state, stood merely 4 meters. In terms of scale, the Winter Knight seemed like a child before a giant. Even if Taser were reduced to scrap metal, its weight alone could flatten the Winter Knight into a sheet of steel. How could Wood possibly resist? However, to the Emperor's shock, his expectations quickly unraveled. As he directed Taser's arm downward, he felt unexpected resistance. Looking back at Wood, he saw the dragon wings on his back emitting a fierce jet of light and fire, creating a powerful thrust that counteracted Taser's immense force. Despite the massive disparity in size, the two opponents appeared evenly matched in this clash of strength. A scenario that defied all logic. No, calling it a stalemate wasn't entirely accurate. The Emperor soon realized that Taser's arm wasn't just held in place, it was slowly being pushed upward. Even with Taser operating at maximum output, the strain on its joints caused sparks to fly. Yet, the arm continued to rise, the pace gradually increasing. This is impossible. Taser, the Supreme Throne, is the strongest Imperial arm, one that only the Imperial bloodline can wield. How could it lose to an ordinary Imperial arm? As more sparks erupted from Taser's arm, it finally gave way under the immense strain. With a deafening crack, Wood violently tore the arm from its socket. Boom! The massive arm, several dozen meters long, crashed to the ground, shaking the earth and demolishing nearby buildings. The young Emperor let out a hysterical scream, slamming the button to fire Taser's laser again. A thick crimson beam erupted from Taser's mouth. This time, the proximity gave Wood little time to react. Despite the assistance of observation hockey, the beam was already upon him in the blink of an eye. Hyaki Yagio sword-style ultimate technique. Yukiana, snow makeup. With no chance to evade, Wood made a desperate gamble. He could feel the invasive effects of Skaz's dragon essence growing more severe, his body nearing its limits. A prolonged battle was no longer an option. Wood had pinpointed the young Emperor's location. Taser might be incredibly durable, but if he bypassed its armor and eliminated its operator, the battle would be over. The snow falling from the sky grew heavier and denser. Amidst the raging blizzard, the young Emperor, seated in the cockpit, caught a glimpse of an enormous snow mountain forming in the distance. A deafening roar echoed as a colossal ice dragon emerged from behind the mountain. Atop the ice dragon's head stood a breathtakingly beautiful woman wielding a long sword. She appeared like a knight of legend. A dragon rider exuding a commanding, regal aura that seemed to transcend the mortal realm. Boom! The crimson laser collided with the snow dragon knight, unleashing a catastrophic shockwave that shook the entire capital. The ground beneath the clash cracked and split, forming massive fissures that spread outward like an apocalyptic scene. The intense heat of the crimson laser clashed with the freezing cold of the snow dragon knight, creating a collision of extreme temperatures. The sheer force of the impact warped the very air around them. The resulting shockwave obliterated everything within a 10-kilometer radius, generating ring after ring of destructive force that inflicted secondary damage on the surrounding area. Neither attack immediately overpowered the other. Instead, they remained locked in a fierce stalemate, their energies colliding in midair. At times, the crimson laser pushed the snow dragon knight back several meters. At others, the knight's roar forced the beam upward. The battlefield had devolved into a prolonged exchange of ultimate attacks. A beam struggle in the truest sense. Why are you going to such lengths? I only wanted to be a good emperor. Why do you all choose to defy me? Seated within Taser, the young emperor could see that Wood's power was burning through his life force with every passing second. This knowledge only deepened the emperor's confusion. He wasn't a tyrant, nor had he done anything heinous. Why would these rebels sacrifice everything to overthrow him? Fueled by frustration and rage, the Emperor pushed Taser's output to its maximum. The intensified laser beam forced the Snow Dragon Knight back another 10 meters, bringing the crimson energy perilously close to Wood. The enormous crimson beam was now just meters away from Wood. If Taser delivered another surge of energy, Wood would be struck by the full force of the attack, likely suffering double the damage from the beam struggle. In his current state, not even armament hockey could save him from such a direct hit. Survival was impossible. Faced with imminent death, Wood no longer hesitated. The runes of the Heart of God on his chest began to glow brightly, their silvery light piercing through his armor. Chapter 449, You chose the left side in a beam struggle? Roar. As the runes of the Heart of God on Wood's chest erupted with a dazzling silver light, the Snow Maiden Dragon Knight, which had been pushed to the brink, suddenly surged with renewed vigor, as though injected with a powerful stimulant. The massive ice dragon Skaza expanded rapidly, growing to more than twice its original size with a thunderous roar. Atop Skaza's head stood the Snow Maiden, wielding a long sword, her figure glowing with radiant silver light. Her ethereal presence became even more captivating, and a suit of pure silver dragon scale armor materialized on her body, accentuating her already stunning figure and making her appear both seductive and otherworldly. Empowered by the heart of God, the Snow Maiden Dragon Knight's strength and aura surged. With a single slash of her blade, she cleaved through the massive crimson laser before her, and the ice dragon Skaza charged forward with a deafening roar. What had seemed like a hopeless situation for Wood moments ago now shifted dramatically. From near defeat, he gained the upper hand. The tide of the battle had turned, and it was now the young Emperor's turn to feel the crushing pressure Wood had just endured. The Snow Maiden Dragon Knight closed the gap, now mere meters away from Shikao Taser. However, just as Wood thought he was on the verge of victory, Shikao Taser's shoulders opened to reveal an array of smaller cannons, which unleashed a barrage of miniature lasers. The sudden assault forced the Snow Maiden Dragon Knight to retreat, the overwhelming advantage slipping away as the fight returned to a tense stalemate. Seeing this unfold, Wood couldn't help but curse the young Emperor inwardly. This guy's cheats are just ridiculous. He knew that if the stalemate continued, he was doomed. Both the Heart of God and the Winter Knight's secret technique were immensely powerful, but their cost was equally severe. Like a scythe wielded by death itself, each passing second drained more of Wood's life force. He couldn't hold on for much longer. Just as Wood feared he might die before taking down Shikao Taser, a sudden turn of events gave him yet another chance. As Wood had suspected earlier, while Shikao Taser was unparalleled in terms of offense, defense, and capabilities, it was still an imperial arm. A tool that required an operator to function. Without someone to wield it, it was nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. Shikao Taser's immense power came with immense consumption. Its energy source was finite, and every action drained its reserves. Although the energy system had been designed to mitigate the side effects on its user and lower the operational threshold, 1,000 years had passed since its creation. The knowledge to replenish its energy had been lost to time, along with much of the Empire's legendary 48 Imperial arms. This meant that every activation of Shikao Taser consumed a portion of its limited energy reserves, making its power finite. This limitation was why the Empire had sealed Shikao Taser and rarely used it, even in times of crisis. If Shikao Taser truly had no drawbacks and was as powerful as a mobile fortress with no operational barriers, the Empire would have deployed it against border invasions or the Revolutionary Army long ago. Its sheer destructive potential would have easily quelled any opposition. However, Shikao Taser's energy problem was its Achilles heel, and now, after nearly an hour of intense combat at maximum output, its reserves were finally depleted. Inside the cockpit, the young Emperor panicked as warning lights flashed red across the control panel, and an energy insufficient alert appeared on the screen. As Shikao Taser's power waned, the crimson laser began to weaken, and its suppressive force diminished. Seizing the opportunity, the Snow Maiden Dragon Knight, like the final straw that broke the camel's back, unleashed her full strength, pushing the laser back with overwhelming force. Wood, who moments ago had believed himself doomed, found himself stunned by the sudden reversal. The rapid twists and turns in the battle left him momentarily bewildered. But as he quickly pieced things together, he realized the young Emperor's critical mistake. He had positioned himself on the left side during the beam struggle. Across countless worlds and dimensions, an unspoken rule seemed to hold true. Those who stood on the left side of a beam struggle were destined to lose. The young Emperor, oblivious to this ancient adage, had sealed his fate. With Shikao Taser's lasers weakening as its energy reserves dwindled, the Snow Maiden Dragon Knight launched her final assault. A white beam of light, surrounded by swirling snowflakes, pierced through Shikao Taser's chest, creating a massive hole in the colossal machine. The attack culminated with a triumphant dragon's roar, echoing across the battlefield as it tore through Shikao Taser's body and ascended into the skies, vanishing beyond the clouds. On Wood's side, he deactivated the Heart of God, and even the Winter Knight's armor dissipated, leaving him in his normal form, visibly drained and utterly exhausted. Though the duration of the Heart of God's activation had been brief, it had pushed Wood's life force dangerously close to depletion. He knew with certainty that using the Heart of God again would leave him with no chance of survival. Despite his weakened state, Wood was still far more capable than the 10-year-old Emperor, who was powerless and unarmed. When Wood placed the hilt of the Winter Knight's longsword against the young Emperor's neck, it marked the end of the final battle. With Shikao Taser defeated and the Emperor captured, Kurum and Mine eventually arrived at the scene. Seeing that all members of their group were accounted for, Wood let out a deep sigh of relief. However, noticing that they were empty-handed, he couldn't help but ask. "You had so many people. Don't tell me that bastard Honest managed to escape?" "He didn't. Kurom replied, her tone calm but with a hint of frustration. We killed him. Circumstances didn't allow us to capture him alive. Honest wasn't just a manipulative politician, he was also an Imperial arms user. His weapon was exceptionally powerful. Practically a nemesis to other Imperial arms. It was a ring-shaped Imperial arm with the ability to unconditionally destroy other Imperial arms. My Yatsufusa was destroyed by it. Without my undead puppets, we only barely managed to defeat him, and even then, capturing him was impossible due to his strength. Wood blinked in surprise, caught off guard by this revelation. Honest, it seemed, had been hiding his true capabilities all along. Not only had Honest trained at the Temple of Fists, making him a formidable martial artist, but he also wielded an immensely powerful Imperial arm capable of shattering others. Reflecting on the fight, Wood realized he had been fortunate. When he first encountered Honest, the minister must have been confident Shikao Taser would crush Wood, which was why he hadn't used his Imperial arm. Otherwise, Wood might not have survived the encounter. Kurom continued explaining how they had initially gained the upper hand by converting General Do into a puppet, which had given them a significant advantage. However, the tide turned when Honest revealed his Imperial arm's destructive ability. Fortunately, Honest's Imperial arm had a limitation, it could only be used once per week. After destroying Yatsufusa, it was rendered inactive, forcing Honest to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the group. Although the loss of Yatsufusa severely weakened Kurom, they still had Mine's Pumpkin and Run's assistance. Chelsea, however, had contributed little during the fight, acting more like a mascot than a combatant. Ultimately, it took the combined efforts of Kurom, Mine, and Run to defeat Honest, who was far too strong to be captured alive. To prevent him from escaping, they had no choice but to eliminate him. No big deal. Wood said after hearing Kurom's account. Dead is dead. Given all the atrocities he committed, there was no way that guy was going to live long anyway. If anything, dying so easily is letting him off the hook. With General Do slain in battle, Honest dismembered and dead, and the young emperor captured, the empire's leadership was effectively annihilated. The once mighty empire was now little more than a hollow shell. Hearing of Honest's death, the remaining nobles in the capital scattered in all directions, fleeing for their lives. Wood, however, had no energy to chase them down, nor the desire to do so. He reasoned that once the revolutionary army took control, these fleeing nobles would eventually be hunted down, provided they didn't escape the empire's borders. The empire's military, having suffered heavy losses during Shikao Taser's rampage, lost all will to fight upon seeing the emperor captured. The next step for Wood and his companions was clear. They needed to transport the young emperor back to the revolutionary army's headquarters before the empire's remaining forces could regroup and counterattack. This would cement their victory in the war. While Wood, in peak condition, might have been able to take on the entire Imperial army single-handedly, his current state left him utterly spent. With Kurom's Yatsufusa destroyed, and Mine and Run lacking the strength to challenge the empire's vast military, their only option was to flee. The group's escape was arduous. Run carried the captured emperor, while Kurom and Mine supported the weakened Wood. Over 2 grueling days, they evaded the empire's pursuit, finally crossing its borders and reaching safety. Throughout the journey, the young emperor transitioned from struggling and hurling insults to a resigned silence. His change in demeanor was unsurprising. The scenes he witnessed during their escape profoundly impacted him. Unlike Honest, the young emperor wasn't inherently malicious. He was simply naive and overly trusting of Honest. At only 10 years old, his ascent to the throne had been orchestrated by Honest, who had filled the court with his own loyalists. Having never set foot outside the palace, the young emperor had no understanding of the people's suffering and genuinely believed Honest's actions were just. However, the journey forced the young emperor to confront harsh truths. Passing through villages, he saw people celebrating. When Wood inquired about the festivities, the villagers explained that they had heard of Honest's death and the emperor's capture. With the corrupt minister gone and the naive emperor deposed, they believed the empire was finished, and the revolutionary army was on the brink of victory. The young emperor was stunned. He had always thought of himself as a benevolent ruler, loved by his people. The villagers' jubilation shattered this illusion. At first, he dismissed the villagers' reactions as isolated ignorance. But upon arriving at the next village, the emperor, desperate to prove himself, cried out for help, proclaiming his identity as the captured ruler of the empire.